Chapter 1444. Elder Nangong was still in a daze from the fall. He raised his head in bewilderment and realized that a thin layer of frost had formed on the ground. It looked like it was caused by the ice ball that the kid had tossed earlier. I didn't really want to kill anyone. Elder Tian sighed softly and shook his head. He stared pitifully at Elder Nangong, who was sitting on the ground. His tone of voice was filled with murderous intent as he said, "However, you actually dared to steal my treasure. You're courting death. I'll fulfill your wish." After speaking, Elder Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. With a leap, he once again flew into the air. The surging yuan qi within his body surged out violently and condensed into a huge yuan qi vortex in his right fist. He then fiercely smashed it towards Elder Nangong. Elder Nangong, who was sitting on the ground, saw this and the corners of his mouth twitched. Alarm bells rang in his heart and he immediately rolled to his feet. He quickly chanted an incantation and combined the black and white jade artifacts into one with a pa sound. As Elder Nangong poured his yuan qi into it without holding back, the black and white jade artifact gradually emitted a gentle but not dazzling golden light. After the light spread out, it slowly covered Elder Nangong's body and formed a cloak-like golden battle robe. Seeing that Xiaofan's fist was about to land on his body, Elder Nangong gritted his teeth and raised all the yuan qi in his body to the limit. He then stretched out his hand and suddenly pulled on the battle robe on his body. The golden battle robe once again turned into a stream of light and condensed in Elder Nangong's palm. It quickly changed shape and became a shining golden blade. Elder Nangong did not say anything and immediately swung the sharp blade towards Elder Heaven Ancestor's fist. The people of Burning Sky faction were stunned. This magic weapon was too heaven-defying, wasn't it? One black and one white could turn into a shield and a spear. When combined, it could turn into a defensive battle robe. But with just a casual tug, it turned into a dagger. No wonder this Elder Nangong was so arrogant. It turned out that he was full of confidence with a divine weapon in his hand. There was a series of bangs in the air as Elder Heaven Ancestor's yuan qi fist and Elder Nangong's golden blade intertwined. Like two poisonous snakes biting each other, they fiercely fought back and forth, each wanting to devour the other. However, after more than a dozen exchanges, the strength of both sides seemed to be in a state of equal strength, unable to determine the victor. At this moment, Hongzhu and Gong Xiaoxi were extremely anxious. They really wanted to help Xiaochen, but in this kind of high-level confrontation, with their meager skills, there was no way they could interfere at all. Even if they forcefully interfered, they would be beaten and defeated at any moment. Coupled with the fact that there were still 5 profound cloud sect disciples standing in a row in front of them, not even the slightest gap could be seen. Therefore, Hongzhu and Gong Xiaoxi could only stand where they were, staring unblinkingly at the situation in front of them with worry written all over their faces. In contrast, the profound cloud sect disciples looked extremely calm, as if they were not worried at all that Elder Nangong would be defeated. In their view, with the current situation, one of them would be the first to fall. That exalted immortal Xiao had already been injured, so he definitely would not be able to fight for long. Even if both sides were to be injured, they would still be able to rush forward in time to save Elder Nangong and kill that so-called exalted immortal Xiao. Boom! After the two had fought for a long time, a violent explosion of yuan qi suddenly rang out. The two who had been fighting each other first trembled slightly before explosively retreating through the air. Elder Nangong's figure flashed and returned behind the 5 disciples. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. The golden battle robe on his body had also disappeared. Elder Heaven Ancestor had retreated to Hongzhu's side with a very gloomy expression. His originally rosy skin had also become deathly white. He supported himself with both hands on his knees and panted heavily. Yay! Big Sister's husband is still the most powerful. That old thing has been beaten until he spat out blood, but you're completely fine. Hongzhu waved her little fist and cheered. She glared at Elder Nangong in a provocative manner, then happily grabbed Xiao Chen's arm and asked curiously, "Oh, that's right, hubby, why did your voice suddenly change just now? Why did it sound like an old man to me? Little demon and hurry up and take Hongzhu away from here." Ugh. Xiao Chen's voice had already returned to its original state, but he did not immediately answer Hongzhu's question. Instead, he gave a command to the flying sword with great difficulty. After giving the command intermittently, Xiao Chen finally could not help but let out a muffled groan. He clutched his chest with a pained expression and knelt to the ground. Huh. Cough cough cough. Elder Nangong's hoarse laughter came from not far away. He wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth and threw a few pieces into the air. They were black and white jade artifacts that had already been cracked into several pieces and had lost their luster. "Boy, you didn't expect this, did you?" Elder Nangong's expression was a mixture of pride and ferocity. Coupled with the remaining blood on his face, he looked very terrifying. "You are indeed very strong. If it wasn't for the protection of this old man's magic weapon, perhaps I would have really died in your hands today. Xiao Chang. Could it be that you?" Finally realizing the seriousness of the problem, Hongzhu's original joyful expression instantly disappeared and turned into a look of panic. He could not help but cry out involuntarily. At this time, a little demon had already driven the flying sword to Hongzhu's side, intending to follow Xiao Chen's orders to take her away. However, before she could act, she was pushed away by Hongzhu. After pushing the flying sword away, Hongzhu squatted down and reached out to help Xiao Chen up. However, when he looked up, he found that the light in Xiao Chen's eyes had begun to gradually dissipate. Xiao Chen struggled to maintain the last bit of his consciousness. He shook his head powerlessly, feeling extremely bitter in his heart. After the last clash between Elder Heaven Ancestor and Elder Nangong, Xiao Chen, who had been staying in the Sea of Consciousness, noticed that the aura of Elder Heaven Ancestor's primordial spirit had suddenly weakened to the point of imminent danger. Xiao Chen made a prompt decision and immediately took over his own body. However, as soon as he took over, he found that his injuries were much more serious than Elder Nangong's. At this time, several important meridians in his body had been broken and he could not circulate his primordial spirit. He was basically relying on the last breath of his primordial spirit to hold on. That was why Xiao Chen asked an little demon to take Hongzhu away immediately. Otherwise, with Elder Nangong's unrelenting attitude, if he targeted Hongzhu, the consequences would be unimaginable. "So your name is Xiao Chang. That's good too. There are too many nameless people who have died in my hands. You are still an opponent worth remembering." A gloomy voice sounded in the living room. Elder Nangong stared at Xiao Chen, who was kneeling on the ground, and said coldly, "But that's all. Next year today will be the anniversary of your death." Chapter 1445. As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Nangong gave a meaningful glance to the disciples surrounding him. Immediately, two of them executed their movement skills and rushed in front of Xiao Chen and Hongzhu. Circulating their mental cultivation techniques, they displayed the cultivation of a perfect nascent soul cultivator. Then, they simultaneously took out their own magic tools and fiercely slashed at the two. Husband, wake up." Hongzhu repeatedly shook Xiao Chen, but the latter did not react at all. It was obvious that he had already lost consciousness. Hongzhu watched as the two magic tools, which were flashing with a strange light, approached menacingly while Xiao Chen remained motionless in his arms. His mind raced at lightning speed, and he no longer cared about his panic and despair. His eyes shifted, and he caught a glimpse of the flying sword beside him. He recalled the order Xiao Chen had given him earlier, and immediately reached out to grab the hilt of the flying sword. "Go! Get us out of here!" Hongzhu tightly hugged Xiao Chen with his other hand and sternly shouted at the flying sword. Boom boom! The two disciples' magic tools simultaneously smashed into the ground, creating two deep crescent-shaped pits. Immediately, crushed stones flew in all directions and dust rose into the air, filling the parlor and causing everyone present to cough repeatedly. They could not even see what was in front of them, and could only continuously wave their hands in vain in an attempt to disperse the dust in front of them. When the dust finally dispersed, everyone focused their eyes and saw that Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu had long since disappeared from the parlor. The two disciples looked at each other in shock and hastily chased after them outside the house. As far as the eye could see, the two of them could only see a black dot rapidly disappearing into the distance in the sky. It seemed that they would not be able to catch up to it in the span of a few breaths. The two disciples looked at each other in dismay. Helpless, they could only return to the house with dejected expressions and apologize to Elder Nangong. Humph! Such a powerful magic tool was only used to escape in the end. What a reckless waste of God's gift! Elder Nangong did not blame his subordinates. He merely rolled his eyes and snappily ridiculed them. At this moment, the entire guest hall was terrifyingly quiet. The people of the Burning Sky faction could only watch helplessly as the consecrator they had painstakingly invited was beaten to the point of escaping. They couldn't help but feel anxious and fearful, not knowing how that Elder Nangong would deal with them. Cough cough. Elder Nangong held his chest and coughed a few times. Then, he straightened his body and turned around to look at Duan Suqing and Gong Xiaoxi. He said arrogantly, "I believe you have already seen it. That arrogant Xiao Chang, who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, has already been killed by me. Now, quickly prepare a few well-equipped rooms for us to have a good rest." Go to hell. Why should I prepare a room for you? Do you think you're... Gong Xiaoxi was so angry that he glared at Duan Suqing and cursed. But before he could finish, Duan Suqing pulled him aside. "Elder Nangong, please don't lower yourself to the same level as this kid. He's young and hasn't seen much, so he's not very sensible." Duan Suqing apologized again and again. Elder Nangong's expression was a little cold. He glared at Gong Xiaoxi, but didn't flare up. He only snorted unhappily. Duan Suqing pulled back Gong Xiaoxi, who was about to go berserk again. He first gave him a look, then asked tentatively, "Allow me to ask a question. I wonder if Elder Nangong wants to stay here to enjoy the scenery of the Burning Sky faction, or if you're not feeling well and need to recuperate for a while. This way, I can arrange more suitable services for you." Actually, Duan Suqing also had his own plans. Everyone had seen the scene of Xiao Chang and Elder Nangong fighting. Although Xiao Chang was indeed defeated and left, Elder Nangong also vomited blood and was injured. Now that he suddenly requested to rest in the Burning Sky faction, people couldn't help but be a little suspicious. If Elder Nangong was really seriously injured and wanted to use the Burning Sky faction to recuperate, then Duan Suqing would have to think it over. Should he bear the humiliation and obediently bear the burden, or should he fly into a rage and directly exterminate these people? I didn't know that Sect Master Duan had such a breadth of mind. You don't even have the slightest bit of reaction when your consecrator was exterminated. Admirable, admirable. Elder Nangong glanced at Duan Suqing, sneered, and said unhurriedly, "I'm not recuperating, nor am I going on a holiday. This old man considered that you would need time to take inventory of those heavenly treasures, so I purposely stayed for a few days to let you carefully examine them before handing them over to us." The corner of Duan Suqing's mouth twitched. He knew that his little thoughts had probably been seen through by Elder Nangong. He could only smile awkwardly, call over a disciple beside him, and give a few instructions. Then, he forced a smile and said to Elder Nangong, that, "The rooms have already been prepared for you. Please follow this disciple and stay there. If you have any other instructions, you can also directly tell this disciple." "And, that's more like it." Elder Nangong nodded in satisfaction. Then, he brought a few disciples and swaggered out the door with the Burning Sky faction people. When passing by Gong Xiaoxi, Elder Nangong gave him a rather disdainful look, and sneered, "Little guy, learn more from your sect master." Remember, your Burning Sky faction is just an insignificant small sect. Don't think that just because you have the protection of a trash profound ascending stage expert, you can do whatever you want. Our Profound Cloud sect only needs to move a finger to destroy you at any time. After saying that, Elder Nan Gong laughed to the sky, and left the reception hall amidst the compliments of the 5 disciples. You. Gritting his teeth, Gong Xiaoxi stared at the departing Elder Nan Gong and his subordinates. He was so angry that he clenched his fists. His face was ashen, and he wanted to rush up and perish together with them. Xiaoxi, I know you can't take this lying down. Duan Suqing patted Gong Xiaoxi's shoulder, and let out a long sigh. Staring at the backs of those people, he said bitterly, actually, I also hate that arrogant Elder Nan Gong. But you also know that the Profound Cloud sect is after all an outstanding sect in the cultivation world. With the current situation of our Burning Sky faction, we don't even have the strength to fight to the death with them. I understand, but that old man's words are too infuriating. He clearly doesn't put any of us in his eyes. Gong Xiaoxi took a few deep breaths, but he was still somewhat indignant. Gong Xiaoxi wasn't really stupid. His own master couldn't gain any advantage in front of Elder Nan Gong, and was even seriously injured. Now that his master's whereabouts were unknown, it showed just how unfathomable Elder Nan Gong's strength was. He had just broken through to the nascent soul stage. If he were to go up and provoke Elder Nan Gong based on his hot-bloodedness, it would be like a moth flying into a flame. Therefore, Gong Xiaoxi could only suppress the anger in his heart and wait for an opportunity to take revenge. Chapter 1446. Sigh, who said it wasn't? Originally, I was planning to. Duan Suqing paused. In order to prevent Gong Xiaoxi from being impulsive, he didn't say what he was thinking just now. He only helplessly advised, forget it, forget it. Don't be too rash in everything. Let's go back and think about it at length. That's the only way. Now, I can only hope that Immortal Master is lucky and can successfully escape this calamity. As for those treasures, it doesn't matter. If that old thing has the cheek to ask for them, there's no harm in giving them all to him. Gong Xiaoxi shook his head in annoyance. He bid farewell to Duan Suqing and prepared to find Gong Ruidong to report the situation just now. He wanted to see if Gong Ruidong could help him with some ideas. Looking at the messy parlor after the battle, Duan Suqing felt a headache coming on and rubbed his temples. He ordered the disciples present to clean up the place and ran to supervise the inventory of the treasures. Duan Suqing planned to personally comb through all the treasures and hide some of the higher-grade treasures in advance. He didn't want all the good things to be snatched away by Elder Nan Gong. If that happened, he would really regret it till his intestines turned green. The Burning Heavens faction was in chaos for a few days. At the gate of a house a few hundred kilometers away from the Lucian prefecture, 2 figures of an old man and a middle-aged man walked out. The middle-aged man was the mysterious young master. After a long period of medication and recuperation, the injuries on his face had finally completely healed. The bandages that were originally wrapped around his face were completely removed and he returned to his normal appearance. The young master, who had just recovered, immediately began to deal with some matters that were previously inconvenient for him to handle personally. The first thing he did was to call Elder Shen and ask him to immediately bring him to a secret prison where prisoners were locked up. He was prepared to personally interrogate an extremely important prisoner. After walking for a while with many twists and turns, Elder Shen led the young master to an extremely ordinary-looking house. After passing through the gate, the two of them did not walk in the direction of the room. Instead, they went straight to the back garden and walked to the side of a fake mountain. It was unknown what mechanism Elder Shen stretched out his hand and turned, but a door suddenly appeared at the bottom of the rockery. After pushing it open, it was pitch black inside. Elder Shen took the lead and walked in, and the young master followed closely behind. After the two of them entered the door slowly closed and turned back into a rockery. From the outside, there was no trace of it at all. Passing through the dark and damp walkway, the two of them arrived outside of a relatively luxurious and clean prison cell. Elder Shen took the first step and respectfully pushed open the door. After which, he bent his waist and waited by the side. The young master nodded his head in satisfaction. With his hands behind his back, he walked in with his chest puffed out and his hands behind his back. However, when he entered the cell and saw the woman locked inside, he couldn't help but freeze. He stood rooted to the spot and didn't recover for a long time. The woman was originally sitting on the chair in a daze, bored to death. When she heard the footsteps, she raised her beautiful face and glanced at the person with her beautiful eyes. Her body trembled and her expression was a little sluggish. It was actually this guy. Why is he here? Isn't this too inconceivable? It's you. After a long while, the two of them finally came back to their senses. The young master's eyes were full of confusion, and the beautiful woman was also confused. They pointed at each other and shouted in unison with faces full of surprise. Cheng Menjing, how did you enter the cultivation world? The young master furrowed his brows and took 2 steps forward, staring at Cheng Menjing as he asked. Looking at Cheng Menjing's beautiful face, the young master didn't have the slightest bit of appreciation. He thought to himself, no wonder his eyelids had jumped for no reason when he heard the name Cheng Yaoyao. So it was Cheng Menjing, that troublesome girl. What's it to you? Cheng Menjing snorted and rolled her eyes at the young master with a face full of disgust. She said huffily, I didn't think that you wouldn't die. You're quite lucky. However, when my servant, Xiao Chen, arrives, you'll still die. When he heard Xiao Chen's name, the young master's expression changed slightly. He muttered to himself for a moment, then stared at Cheng Menjing and asked, You've actually cultivated to the nascent soul great circle in such a short amount of time? How did you do it? Could it be that there's some sort of special cultivation method? Don't ask me so many questions. Since you know how powerful it is, then don't offend me. Cheng Menjing fiercely waved her little fist and bared her teeth at the young master, You'd better know your place and let me go. Otherwise, I'll find Xiao Chen later and make you perform some sort of flying performance. I'll just fly you to your death. You're dreaming. You'd better stay here obediently for me. The young master was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He reckoned that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of this little chili pepper, so he simply turned around and left the cell with a flick of his sleeves. When he walked out of the cell, Elder Shen hurriedly lowered his head in fear. He had been standing outside the entire time, and although he couldn't hear what was being said inside clearly, the tone of the two wasn't very pleasant to the ear. He didn't know if there was some sort of conflict, so he couldn't help but feel uneasy. The young master stood in front of the cell for a while, his expression constantly changing. It was obvious that he was thinking intensely. Elder Shen didn't dare to speak and stood respectfully on the spot, waiting. Let's go. After a while, the young master seemed to have finally made some sort of decision. He simply said 2 words and then walked out. Elder Shen hurriedly followed behind him. After leaving the dungeon and walking out of the fake mountain, the young master looked left and right. When he didn't see anyone, he lowered his voice and instructed Elder Shen, later, take my warrant and bring that magic tool over. Control that little girl inside. Don't let her have any way to cause trouble. Elder Shen was slightly startled and looked in the direction of the dungeon. He didn't really understand why this little girl who had been obediently staying in the dungeon would suddenly cause trouble. However, he didn't dare to disobey the young master's orders, so he immediately nodded and agreed before retreating. The young master let out a breath and put his hands behind his back. On the surface, he pretended to be calm, but in reality, he hurriedly walked to a rather secluded room in the courtyard. He quickly poured a basin of water, then took out a voice transmission talisman and threw it into the water. He silently muttered a few words and waited for the other party's reply. Young master, I've fortunately completed the task that you asked me to do. I've already taken care of it. A wave of bubbles quickly surfaced in the water, then an old voice rang out. "Oh. Elder Nangong is indeed extraordinary. I really didn't misjudge you." The young master nodded in satisfaction and asked again, "Since the task has been completed, why didn't you return immediately? Did anything happen?" Chapter 1447. This. Elder Nangong's voice was a little hesitant, but he still answered honestly, "In the process of carrying out the task, I accidentally got injured, so I need some time to recuperate. Do you have any new instructions? If there are other urgent things to do, then you may need to send someone else." "What? You're injured?" The young master was shocked and asked eagerly, "Elder Nangong, your cultivation is so high, how can you be injured? Has the opponent's strength already surpassed yours?" In the young master's impression, Elder Nangong should be at the peak of the profound ascension stage. Although he was not the top expert in the entire cultivation world, it should be more than enough to deal with the Burning Sky sect. He didn't expect that he would be injured. Elder Nangong stood in the room of the Burning Sky sect with a slightly bitter smile on his face. It turned out that Duan Suqing's guess was right, he really was injured. He just stayed in the Burning Sky sect under the guise of waiting for the treasure to be counted and recuperated. But even so, Elder Nangong really didn't care about this little injury. After all, he had been at the peak of the profound ascension stage for a long time, so his injury was much lighter than Xiao Chen's. Moreover, he had the most precious healing pill of the profound cloud sect with him, plus the 5 disciples by his side, so he only needed to recuperate quietly for a few days. "It's just a small injury, it's not a big deal. Thank you for your concern, young master. I can go back in a few days." Elder Nangong collected his thoughts and said to the water basin. "That's good. I don't know if Elder Nangong has investigated the opponent's background." The young master's voice quickly came back. It was obvious that he was more concerned about the situation of the opponent. "This. I did not investigate his background in detail. However, when I was fighting against him, I heard others call him Xiao Chang. Furthermore, the magic tools he used were extremely unique. There was a flying sword that seemed to have developed intelligence. Furthermore, there was a bluish-purple flame. I suspect that it was a type of heavenly flame. Unfortunately, I was unable to capture it." Elder Nangong frowned and recalled for a while before reporting in detail. "Xiao Chang. Xiao Chen." The young master repeated it a few times. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind and he came to a conclusion. This Xiao Chang was most likely the Xiao Chen that Cheng Menjing had mentioned. I can't believe he really came to the world of cultivators. "Elder Nangong, how was your match with Xiao Chang?" After the young master confirmed the suspicions in his heart, he immediately asked, "I know that you must have obtained a complete victory. However, I mainly want to know what happened to that fellow in the end." "Oh, that brat was already on the verge of death after being beaten by me. He was heavily injured and on the verge of death. Although he was carried away by a woman who used that flying sword to escape, based on the injuries he suffered, he probably won't be able to live for long." Elder Nangong said casually. "Oh. Elder Nangong, are you sure that he won't be able to live? Did you send people to continue tracking him?" The young master did not give up and said in a deep voice, "According to what I know, that fellow is extremely cunning. It would be best if you could personally. No, it would be best if you could bring his corpse back and let me personally confirm it." The reason why he was so cautious was because the young master understood Xiao Chen better. He was very familiar with his unkillable cockroach-like nature. Even if he was beaten to a state where he was on his last breath, as long as he was not killed directly, he would make a comeback in no time. There had never been a situation where he died from serious injuries. "I don't think that's necessary, right?" Elder Nangong's tone was somewhat impatient. "Do you still have any doubts about me? I dare to guarantee that that brat definitely won't be able to live. You don't have to worry about this." In actuality, Elder Nangong did not have much respect for this young master. At that time, he had only agreed to deal with Xiao Chen because the Great Master had personally stepped forward. Originally, Elder Nan Gong already felt a little sullen when he was being ordered around by a little brat. In the end, the other party actually did not trust him. This was simply preposterous. Then. Alright, then rest well for a while. It won't be too late to come back after you've recovered. I will send people to confirm again. You don't have to worry about it. The young master could naturally hear the impatience in Elder Nan Gong's voice, but he did not dare to continue bickering with him. He could only helplessly pacify him. As the second largest sect in the cultivation world, the Profound Cloud sect had a strong foundation. The young master felt that there was no need to offend them for no reason. It was better to think of a way himself. Just as the young master poured the water out of the basin, Elder Shen knocked on the door and walked in. Young master, I have already used that special magic tool to tie up that girl with the surname Cheng. Elder Shen cupped his hands and reported in a serious manner, as you expected, that magic tool can indeed suppress the vitality in her body, causing her to be unable to use her true strength. Then what should we do with her next? The young master thought for a while and instructed, put her aside for now. There is no need to care about her or interrogate her. In any case, there will definitely be no results from the interrogation. Elder Shen's face instantly turned pale. He stammered and wanted to apologize, Sorry, young master, we tried our best, but, before Elder Shen could finish speaking, the young master waved his hand and said indifferently, I have no intention of blaming you. I know this girl. She has always been a thorn, so there is no need to care about her for now. I have other things for you to do. Alright, please instruct me, young master. I will definitely do my best to complete the task you have given me. When Elder Shen heard that he was not going to be punished, he immediately became spirited and patted his chest. The young master nodded his head and took out a map of the cultivation world from the bookshelf. He spread it out on the table and looked at it carefully. Then, he used a pen to circle an area on the map and instructed, bring more people and carefully search this area for the whereabouts of a person called Xiao Chen. That person might also change his name to Xiao Chang. After you find him, immediately kill him and bring his corpse back to me. Do you understand? Understood. Subordinate obeys. When Elder Shen heard that this task was much simpler than interrogating a hostage without any torture, he immediately nodded his head happily. After listening to the young master's description of Xiao Chen's appearance, Elder Shen left the room. He called a few profound ascending stage experts and a group of nascent soul peak stage subordinates. He took the map that the young master gave him and rushed towards the marked location. Chapter 1448. On Xiao Chen's side, Hongzhu gripped the hilt of his flying sword in one hand and carried the unconscious Xiao Chen in the other. In order to escape from the Burning Sky faction, he was like a headless fly that was randomly bumping around, until he finally ran into an unknown mountain forest. Sensing that Xiao Chen's breathing was gradually weakening, Hongzhu could not help but panic. Lowering his head, he searched around, and finally found a suitable cave. He immediately ordered the flying sword to stop, and landed outside the cave. Hongzhu first had the flying sword explore the cave, and after not finding anything out of the ordinary, he supported Xiao Chen into the cave. After finding a relatively large and flat rock, he carefully placed Xiao Chen on top of it, then hurriedly took out the medicinal pills he had brought with him and stuffed them into his mouth. These medicinal pills had been specially brought over by Hongzhu from the martial arts world, and were basically refined from rare medicinal herbs that the Hong family had accumulated over 100 years. Moreover, the majority of them had very good healing effects, and even if one was able to eat one of them, there would still be hope for a full recovery. At this moment, Hongzhu was already panicking, and no matter what kind of medicinal pills he took, he stuffed them all into Xiao Chen's mouth. Although these healing pills melted in Xiao Chen's mouth the moment they entered his mouth, and all of them were successfully ingested, the healing effects were not very obvious. The only thing that could be seen was that Xiao Chen's complexion had become slightly rosier, but his entire body was still completely motionless. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that his life was still quietly and swiftly slipping away. Hongzhu anxiously stood by the side for a while, and fed all the medicinal pills he could use to Xiaochen, but there was still no improvement. At this moment, Hongzhu finally realized that just relying on medicinal pills would not be able to solve Xiaochen's problem. The anxious Hongzhu could not help but stand up, and anxiously paced back and forth in the cave, racking his brain to think of a way to save Xiaochen. After pondering for a long time, Hongzhu's eyes suddenly lit up. He quickly returned to Xiaochen's side and helped him into a cross-legged sitting position against the stone wall. Glancing around the empty cave, Hongzhu clenched his teeth, quickly and neatly took off his clothes and placed them aside. After that, he sat down cross-legged and placed his palms against Xiaochen's, intending to enter a dual cultivation state with him. Just now, Hongzhu suddenly recalled that he had once heard Xiaochen mention that a cultivator's origin qi could aid in healing injuries. Although he did not know exactly how to do it, Xiaochen was currently unconscious. No matter how Hongzhu thought about it, it seemed like the only way to transfer his origin qi to Xiaochen's body was to rely on the method of dual cultivation. In Hongzhu's mind, after he transmitted his own origin qi over, he would then attempt to guide it. Perhaps he would be able to use it to heal Xiaochen's injuries. Just as Hongzhu was calming her mind and circulating her mental cultivation method, and then, through her palms, began to transfer her yuan qi into Xiaochen's body, she suddenly felt a powerful energy suddenly appear, completely sucking away all of her yuan qi. Before Hongzhu could react, her yuan qi reappeared and was swiftly reflected back at her from Xiaochen's palms. Caught off guard, Hongzhu was directly struck by the yuan qi she had sent out, and her entire body was sent flying. Pfff, Hongzhu's back was fiercely smashed against the stone wall, and she could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The powerful impact had shaken her entire body to the point of dizziness, causing her to see stars, and her qi and blood to churn. If Hongzhu had not been clenching her teeth and using her tenacious willpower to support herself, she might have fainted long ago. How could this be? Hongzhu sat on the ground in a daze for a long time, repeatedly muttering to herself, her body like an autumn leaf in the wind, trembling incessantly. She climbed to her feet with great difficulty, and when she saw Xiaochen quietly lying on the ground, not moving at all, Hongzhu's eyes instantly turned red, and 2 streams of tears of grievance slid down her cheeks. After taking a few steps forward, Hongzhu threw herself onto Xiaochen's body, her heart filled with sorrow as she sobbed, "Xiaochen, just what do I have to do to wake you up? How can I restore you to your original state? I've already used every method within my power, but why can't I succeed? Aren't you usually very powerful? Can't you wake up and teach me? Say something." Gently stroking Xiaochen's cheeks with trembling hands, Hongzhu could clearly feel that the latter's life was gradually fading away. She could not help but feel great sorrow in her heart. The emotions that she had been suppressing at the bottom of her heart finally erupted, and she tightly hugged Xiaochen's lifeless body. "Xiaochen, Xiaochen, can you hear me calling you?" Pressing her face against Xiaochen's palm, Hongzhu softly whispered, "Why are you always so cold to me? Do you hate me a lot? Can you answer me seriously for once? Do you know how much pressure I've been enduring to silently like you? I've been a rebellious child since I was a child, and I can even ignore the advice of my family. It may seem like I'm free and unbridled, but can you understand the pain of being despised by your closest kin? You must be able to understand. Weren't you also chased out of the house by your family? From this, it can be seen that we are in the same boat. No wonder when I first saw you, I felt a sense of kinship. Xiaochen, you little scoundrel. You've always been hot and cold to Big Sister, but now you've finally behaved yourself, haven't you? You can only lie flat on the ground and let Big Sister tease you, but why do I wish that you can bully me again? Even if it's just to hide a little further away." Lifting his face from Xiaochen's hand, Hongzhu's face was already streaked with tears. It was already late at night, and the silvery white moonlight spilled over the cave entrance, illuminating the dark green vines and branches. It looked very tranquil and peaceful, but the atmosphere in the cave was very solemn and sorrowful. Staring at Xiaochen's pale cheeks, Hongzhu could not help but feel a wave of sorrow in her heart. Could it be that he really could not escape this calamity? Could it be that she really had to watch him stop breathing and leave her behind? Gritting her teeth, Hongzhu put on some clothes, picked up Xiaochen, and walked out of the cave. Leaning against a rock, she rested her head on Xiaochen's chest, her eyes gazing at the twinkling stars in the sky. Xiaochen, look at that brightest star, it seems to be the Big Dipper. Many people like to rely on it to guide them, and in fact, you are very much like my Big Dipper. As long as I can follow you, I will definitely not go wrong. Xiaochen, this is the first time that Big Sister has accompanied you to watch the stars, and it might also be the last time we do so. In the past, I really wanted to find a chance to have a romantic moment with you, and now, my wish has finally come true. It's just that. I never thought that it would be under such terrible circumstances, hee. Reaching out to stroke her hair, Hongzhu bitterly smiled and shook her head, her voice somewhat choked with emotion. Chapter 1449. Actually, when we were at Little Hong's pharmacy, I already started to like you a little. I began to quietly pay attention to you, and even, developed a good impression of you. I just didn't have the time to tell you. I always pretended to tease you. Woo. As she spoke, Hongzhu sensed that Xiaochen's body temperature was slowly dropping, her breathing was becoming extremely weak, and her heartbeat was also becoming slower and slower. The despairing Hongzhu was finally unable to continue speaking. She covered her mouth and sobbed in a low voice, tears pouring out of her eyes like a broken dam. She tightly grasped Xiaochen's arm, feeling so much pain that even her heart began to wrench. After an unknown period of time, Xiaochen's body, which Hongzhu had been leaning against, had already become ice-cold and lifeless. Her tears had also finally slowly stopped, and her complexion had gradually calmed down. Hongzhu sniffled, first wiped away the tears on her face, and then took off a white porcelain earring from her earlobe. With a casual pinch, the earring broke with a crack, revealing a purplish-black pill. Since you've left, there's no need for me to continue living in this world. Wait for me at the Bridge of Helplessness, we'll be on our way together. Hongzhu carefully tidied up Xiaochen's clothes, as she spoke in a gentle voice. As soon as she finished speaking, Hongzhu stuffed the purplish-black pill into her mouth. When it entered her mouth, she first felt a trace of bitterness, which was quickly followed by a faint sweetness. Hongzhu smiled faintly, as she gently leaned against Xiaochen's chest. As her consciousness gradually grew blurry, she quietly closed her eyes, silently waiting for the effects of the pill to take effect, so that she could fearlessly welcome the moment when death would descend upon her. Suddenly, a fierce gale began to blow all around them, uprooting many flowers and plants. Not far away, a large and sturdy locust tree was also swaying incessantly, its leaves drifting down along with the wind, forming a huge vortex that sparkled with white light that gradually approached Xiaochen and Hongzhu's position. Just as the whirlpool arrived in front of Xiaochen and Hongzhu, it immediately stopped spinning. Many leaves and weeds fell to the ground with a rustling sound, while the white light gradually condensed and transformed into the illusory figure of an old man. Standing in front of the two, the old man looked at the pale-faced and lifeless Xiaochen, as well as the smiling Hongzhu, whose eyes were tightly closed. He shook his head slightly and sighed helplessly. Then, he extended his hand and injected a strand of white gas into Hongzhu's body. After that, he placed his hand behind his back and stood there, quietly waiting. Cough, cough, cough. Not long after, Hongzhu suddenly coughed violently a few times, opened his mouth and spat out a puddle of black liquid, and then slowly opened his eyes. Blinking her eyes in confusion, Hongzhu could only see a ball of white light faintly appearing in front of her eyes. She shook her head to clear her head, then weakly said, What's going on? Am I already dead? Why is there a white light? Little girl, don't be silly, you're still alive. The white silhouette said with a frown. I'm still alive? Hongzhu repeated those words with a confused expression, clearly unable to react. The white silhouette stealthily glanced at Xiao Chen, then turned back to look at Hongzhu and asked, Little girl, you're so young, how could you take things so hard? You're clearly alive and well, so why did you come to this barren mountain to die? Hongzhu finally came to her senses, but when she saw the white silhouette in front of her, she immediately jumped in fright. Are you a human or a ghost? The frightened Hongzhu hurriedly dodged to the side, but unexpectedly bumped into a soft and fluffy object. She quickly turned her head to look, only to see that it was the lifeless Xiao Chen lying beside her. Xiao Chen, sob sob sob. Upon seeing Xiao Chen, Hongzhu's sorrowful emotions welled up in his heart once again. It seemed that he really was not dead. He just did not know what had saved him. Sigh. This old man is not a human, nor is he a ghost, but the mountain god of this barren mountain. The white silhouette was not angered by Hongzhu's questioning, and only leisurely paced back and forth in front of the two of them. When she mentioned her identity, she even proudly raised her chin, and her aura seemed to have become much stronger. What? Mountain god? Then you're an immortal? Hongzhu was slightly taken aback, then suddenly thought of something, and immediately pounced towards the old man, but in the end, she missed and fell to the ground. After all, that old man was only a silhouette, and not a real existence. Hongzhu didn't care too much about it, and immediately got up after falling, knelt on the ground, and begged the white silhouette, Great Immortal, can you save my boyfriend? Your boyfriend? What happened to him? The white silhouette stealthily glanced at Xiao Chen, a trace of doubt in her voice. Hongzhu also turned his head to look at Xiao Chen, and felt a pain in his heart. He turned back to look at the silhouette, and said with difficulty, He's already dead, but I think that with your boundless magic power, you should be able to bring him back to life, right? What? You said he's dead? The white silhouette raised her eyebrows in great surprise, then stretched out a slightly illusory hand, and lightly touched Xiao Chen's face. Her face immediately became somewhat displeased, and she blushed and said, Little girl, what kind of nonsense are you spouting? He's clearly still alive. Look at his flushed little face, and his breathing is quite smooth. Which part of him looks like a dead person? Don't try to deceive this old man. No. He's really dead. If you don't believe me, you can. Hongzhu said in an urgent voice, then turned his head to point at Xiao Chen, and with a single glance, her expression suddenly changed. What's going on? Xiao Chen clearly stopped breathing just a moment ago. Why does he seem to be reacting now? Seeing Xiao Chen's pale cheeks slowly turn rosy, Hongzhu could not believe her own eyes. She stupidly knelt on the ground for a moment, then finally realized what was happening, and rushed over to Xiao Chen. With a trembling finger, she took Xiao Chen's breath, and found that he really was breathing. Xiao Chen. Hongzhu's entire person was shrouded in inconceivable ecstasy, and tears once again flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. Although Hongzhu felt joy from the bottom of her heart, there was still a question lingering in her mind. She had clearly seen Xiao Chen's life force disappear, so how did he recover so quickly? But at this moment, Hongzhu did not care about such things. She constantly shook Xiao Chen, calling out his name, hoping that he would open his eyes and look at her, but Xiao Chen still did not respond, and only his steady breathing proved that he was still alive. Chapter 1450. Don't shake him anymore. This boy is just not dead yet, but that doesn't mean that he isn't injured. If you keep shaking him like this, he might die from your shaking again. The white figure looked a little rueful, but he quickly spoke up to stop Hongzhu. Hongzhu was startled and carefully placed Xiao Chen back to his original position. At this moment, a scene suddenly flashed through her mind. When she had begged the white figure to save Xiao Chen, he had touched Xiao Chen's cheek, and then Xiao Chen had regained his breathing. Could it be that it was precisely because he had casually touched Xiao Chen that Xiao Chen had been pulled back from the brink of death? Could it be that this old man shrouded in white light was really the legendary Great Firmament Golden Immortal? This was simply too miraculous. What are you still standing there for? Seeing Hongzhu staring at him in a daze, the white figure seemed a little uncomfortable. He pointed at Xiao Chen and said, although this kid is still alive, a few of the main meridians in his body have been severed. If we don't use medicine to heal them as soon as possible, it's very likely that he'll really die. Lord Great Immortal, I beg you to lend me a hand and show me the way. Xiao Chen, he can't die. Otherwise, I won't be able to continue living. Hongzhu's heart trembled at these words and she knelt down with a thump, begging with all her heart. The white figure stroked his non-existent beard and lowered his head in thought for a moment. Then, under Hongzhu's hopeful gaze, he slowly said, this old man does have a way to save him, but, Hongzhu could not help but be wild with joy at the old man's words. She even completely ignored the word but and instead asked with an expectant expression, really? You have a way to save Xiao Chen's life? Then. As she spoke, Hongzhu became somewhat hesitant. She was an exceptionally intelligent girl in the first place. Earlier, she had been shocked by Xiao Chen's sudden resurrection. Now that she had calmed down a little, she began to vaguely suspect the old man's motives. They had only met by chance, so why was he willing to save Xiao Chen's life? Moreover, even her own poison had been easily neutralized. This guy, could it be that he had some ulterior motives? You must be very puzzled as to why I would help you expel the poison from your body and even save his life, right? The white figure seemed to have guessed Hongzhu's thoughts as he smiled faintly and spoke in an indifferent tone. Hongzhu hesitated for a moment, but still nodded vigilantly. The white shadow chuckled and explained in an unhurried manner, actually, I can tell that all of you are kind-hearted people. However, due to a freak combination of factors, you were injured by some extremely vicious and evil people, which is why you ended up in such a state. As a divine immortal, it is my duty to uphold justice, so how can I sit back and do nothing? All right. Then I'll believe you, please tell me the method to save them as soon as possible. No matter what the conditions are, as long as I can do it, I will definitely do my best. Hongzhu still had some misgivings in her heart, but she still clenched her teeth and agreed. Although Hongzhu felt that the white shadow's reasoning was a little strange, after weighing the pros and cons, she could only rely on this so-called divine immortal at the moment. In any case, the situation could not get any worse. As long as the white shadow's request was not too excessive, even if she had to work a little harder, it would still be worth it if she could save Xiao Chen's life. It's very simple. I will first give you a list of medicinal ingredients. As long as you can gather all of these ingredients and boil them into a medicinal soup for him to drink, there will definitely be an effect. However, you will still need to coordinate with a few other auxiliary tasks. If all of them are successful, then it won't be long before he can fully recover. The white shadow chuckled and spoke in an unhurried manner. What medicinal ingredients? Tell me, I will definitely find them. When Hongzhu heard that the white shadow wanted to boil medicine and not do some strange things, her heart instantly relaxed and she impatiently asked. The white shadowy figure nodded with satisfaction, then reported the names and dosages of those herbs one by one. These medicinal ingredients are all from the inner. After listening to the white shadow recite the prescription, Hongzhu was somewhat dazed. She had indeed heard of all the medicinal ingredients that the old divine immortal had mentioned, but the biggest problem now was that these medicinal ingredients could only be grown in the inner martial world. They had never been seen in the world of immortal cultivation. The medicinal ingredients and treasures of heaven and earth produced in the inner martial world were completely different from those in the world of immortal cultivation. Even the medicinal ingredients that Xiao Chen had used to boil the medicine for his breakthrough were unique to the world of immortal cultivation and had nothing to do with the inner martial world. According to Xiao Chen, this was because the concentration of spiritual qi in the inner martial world was different from that in the world of immortal cultivation, so the medicinal ingredients grown in the inner martial world were also different. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Seeing the frown on Hongzhu's face, the white shadow indifferently asked, could it be that you're going to shrink back after hearing that there are so many medicinal ingredients? Hongzhu hurriedly shook her head in denial and said somewhat gloomily, Mountain Divine Immortal, although the medicinal ingredients that you mentioned are not too precious, I'm afraid that I can't find them in this place. Is there any other substitute for them? Hee, don't lose confidence so quickly. Little girl, you seem to be quite smart. I believe that you will definitely have a way to get these medicinal ingredients. The white shadow mysteriously winked, deliberately whetting Hongzhu's appetite. This. Hongzhu frowned. Just as he was worrying about where he could obtain the medicinal ingredients, he heard the white figure continue, however, the most important thing is not the medicinal ingredients. Rather, while this boy is absorbing the medicinal soup, there is one more thing that needs to be done in order to ensure his life. What else needs to be done? Please tell me. Hongzhu's mind was still on how to find the medicinal ingredients, so when she heard the white shadow's words, she casually asked. This. I have to explain first. A serious illness requires fierce medicine. This kid's injuries are too severe, so the medicinal effect of the medicine that this old man has provided is extremely fierce. The white shadow pointed at Xiao Chen and continued to explain, if this kid is not injured, then after taking this medicine, he should be able to hold on for a while. However, you also know that his current condition is not optimistic. After listening for a long time, Hongzhu was still a little confused. He did not know what else needed to be done apart from drinking the medicine, so he could not help but open his mouth to urge, High Immortal, please tell me quickly. What exactly do we need to do? Because he currently only has a sliver of life force left, so the medicinal ingredients that I've listed are the ones with the strongest yang energy and the most vigorous vitality, so. The white shadow paused, a somewhat hesitant expression on her face. Chapter 1451. Hurry up and tell me. Don't keep me in suspense. Hongzhu could not help but stomp his feet anxiously as he inwardly ridiculed, why does this old immortal like to keep others in suspense? Can't he see what time it is? What if he delays treating Xiao Chen's injuries? Seeing that Hongzhu was about to explode in anger, the old man still had an awkward expression on his face and could only helplessly say, it's not that this old man wants to keep you in suspense, it's just that this old man doesn't know how to deal with this situation. Pointing at the motionless Xiao Chen, the white phantom said, as you can see, this boy's injuries are too severe. My prescription is filled with young attribute medicines. If I were to directly use it, he might not be able to endure it and die. Therefore, I need a medicinal catalyst to balance the yin and yang of the medicine, but this old man really can't think of a suitable method at the moment, which is why I'm so conflicted. Medicinal catalyst? Balance yin and yang? Hongzhu blinked in confusion and asked in confusion, is there no suitable heavenly treasure that can be added to the prescription to directly neutralize the medicinal properties? No, then this medicine will have no effect. The white phantom shook his head decisively and explained, I originally intended to use the vigorous yang energy to guide him to regain his vitality. If it is directly turned into a neutralizing medicine, then it will be meaningless. Even if he drinks it, there won't be any reaction. Then what should I do? Hongzhu paced back and forth twice, many medicinal herbs that he had seen and understood before circling around in his mind, but for the time being, he could not think of any suitable medicinal primers that could harmonize the yin and yang of the medicine without losing its medicinal properties. Just as Hongzhu was frowning in thought, the white phantom seemed to sway slightly, the color of its shadow faintly fading. Raising his head to look at the sky, the white phantom did not give Hongzhu any more time to think and quickly said, think carefully about the specific method. In any case, this old man has already told you everything, you can choose what you want to do. I estimate that this boy can only last for a few more hours at most, any later and it will be too late. If you have made up your mind, don't waste too much time. As soon as he finished speaking, the white phantom stretched out a hand and tapped Hongzhu's head. Then, his body began to spin rapidly, stirring up the surrounding dried branches and leaves to wrap around his entire body. Hongzhu had just recovered from his shock when he saw a flash of white light. That cluster of leaves suddenly fell to the ground, and the white phantom image disappeared into thin air. Wait! Immortal, wait a moment, I still don't know where to get the herbs. Ouch! Hongzhu stared blankly for a moment before he suddenly recalled the source of the medicinal herbs and hurriedly chased after them to ask about it. However, he had barely taken 2 steps when his foot tripped over a rock, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground. Ah! Hongzhu abruptly opened his eyes and glanced around in surprise. He found that he had not fallen and was still leaning against Xiao Chen's chest. Moving her body slightly, Hongzhu suddenly heard the faint sound of a heartbeat in her ears. Her fingers were intertwined with Xiao Chen's, and she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, as if he was telling her something. Slowly propping himself up, Hongzhu massaged his swollen temples as he lowered his head to see a pool of black liquid on the ground. He could not help but frown as he muttered, "What is this?" After carefully recalling for a while, Hongzhu still felt that his mind was a complete mess, as if there were some things that he could not remember no matter how hard he tried. Hongzhu shook his head a few times and stared blankly for a while before he muttered to himself, "Oh. I think I had a strange dream. In the dream, I met an immortal. He told me to find some herbs to treat Xiao Chen's injuries." At this point, Hongzhu's entire body suddenly shook, and a thought flashed through his mind. He immediately crawled to his feet and muttered to himself, "Yes, yes, yes. I remember now. There was indeed a white-bearded old man who wanted me to brew some medicine to save Xiao Chen, and he said that he didn't have much time left. It seems that I have to hurry." Just after taking 2 steps, Hongzhu once again paused, his brows knitted together as he pondered. That old man also seemed to have said that other than that prescription, there also needs to be a medicinal catalyst, something that can neutralize yang energy. What is that medicinal catalyst again? Why can't I remember? Hongzhu anxiously paced back and forth for a few steps, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember what the medicinal catalyst that white-bearded old man had mentioned in his dream was. Instead, he clearly remembered the prescription, as if it had been engraved in his mind. "Forget it, I don't care anymore. I'll first prepare the herbs and brew the medicinal soup. I'll think about the medicinal catalyst when the time comes." Hongzhu was afraid that he would think for too long and waste time, so he simply stomped his foot and made up his mind. Bending down to help Xiao Chen up, Hongzhu carefully brought him back to the cave, and laid him flat on the huge rock once more. Looking at the unconscious Xiao Chen, Hongzhu felt a little depressed. He could clearly remember the names of the herbs on the prescription, but in such a desperate situation, where could he go to find those herbs? Time was of the essence, and it was definitely too late to rush to the inner martial world. Furthermore, the key point was that he did not know how to get out of the cultivation world, and that old immortal liked to keep him guessing, insisting that he was smart and would be able to think of a way. Wasn't this clearly a trap? Hongzhu anxiously paced back and forth in the cave, his brain quickly turning, racking his brains for a way that he had not thought of before. Right. After pacing back and forth a few times, Hongzhu's thoughts suddenly flashed like a spark, as if he had caught onto some information. Herbs. Heavenly treasures. That's right. Didn't the Burning Sky faction still keep a bag of heavenly treasures from the inner martial world? There must be something in there that I need. Hongzhu fiercely slapped his forehead, remembering that when he had just entered the cultivation world, he had once inexplicably been smashed by a bag full of heavenly treasures planted by the inner martial world. Later on, it had been collected by Xiao Chen and accompanied him all the way to the Burning Sky faction. If the people of the Burning Sky faction had not cleaned up Xiao Chen's room, then this bag of heavenly treasures should still be in his room. If I bring that bag over, I can brew the medicine. But how should I go and get it? Since the problem of the herbs had been solved, Hongzhu next had to consider the fastest way to obtain it. Since Xiao Chen had escaped with serious injuries, then the Burning Sky faction might have already been occupied by Elder Nangong. Hongzhu reckoned that if he rashly returned, it was very likely that he would walk right into a trap and be caught. Moreover, he had absolutely no idea where he was right now, so even if he wanted to sneak back and retrieve it, it would be a problem. Chapter 1452. The hope that had just sprouted was once again mercilessly doused with a bucket of cold water. This caused Hongzhu to feel anxious from the bottom of her heart. She hurriedly paced back and forth beside Xiao Chen, repeatedly thinking of a feasible solution, but her mind remained completely blank. Just as she was beginning to despair, Hongzhu suddenly felt something flash in the corner of her eye. She raised her head in astonishment and discovered that the flash of light had come from outside the cave. Following the light and walking out of the cave, Hongzhu discovered that there was a sword hilt stuck in the ground. She casually pulled out the sword hilt, and shockingly discovered that it was the flying sword that had brought her and Xiao Chen to escape from the Burning Heaven faction and staggered to this place. Looking at the flying sword in her hand, a thought suddenly flashed through Hongzhu's mind. She hesitated for a moment, but still opened her mouth to ask, "Hey, you, flying sword, can you help me steal something from the Burning Heaven faction?" Although she felt that her actions were a little foolish, Hongzhu had already lost her sense of propriety and was not willing to let go of any method. As soon as she finished speaking, the flying sword suddenly left Hongzhu's palm and floated in front of her, as if waiting for further instructions. Hongzhu was stunned for a moment. Then, he described in a probing manner, "That thing is in the room that Xiao Chen and I were staying in. It's a gray bag, and it's filled with natural treasures. Xiao Chen brought it over from the inner martial world. Can you help me steal it back as soon as possible? Xiao Chen's life is completely in your hands. The earlier you return, the more hope we have." Whoosh! As if it understood Hongzhu's words, the flying sword first flew back to the cave and circled around Xiao Chen a few times. Then, with a piercing sound, it turned into a streak of light and shot out of the cave like a bolt of lightning. It seemed to be returning to the Burning Heaven faction to retrieve the medicinal ingredients. Watching as the flying sword instantly turned into a small black dot in the sky, Hongzhu suddenly remembered something. She hurriedly formed the shape of a trumpet with her hands, placed them by her mouth, and loudly yelled, "Hey! Remember to bring back a pot to boil medicine." When the traces of the flying swords completely disappeared, Hongzhu realized that there was now hope of solving the most important problem. His spirits immediately rose and he no longer felt tired. He immediately rolled up his sleeves and began to collect dry wood from the nearby forest. He even found a stone with a depression and filled a nearby stream with some clean water for later use. Although the strange roars of unknown wild beasts could be heard from time to time around the cave, Hongzhu did not have the time to care about that right now. He did not even have the time to feel the slightest bit of fear as he nimbly picked up the wood and returned to the cave with the stone filled with water. After he had finished preparing everything he needed, Hongzhu went to a corner of the cave and found a sharp protruding rock. He dug a hole in the ground and placed the wood in it. In this way, when the flying sword returned with the herbs, he would be able to boil the medicinal soup as soon as possible. After packing up everything, Hongzhu quietly sat down at Xiao Chen's side. He stretched out his hand and gently stroked the latter's slightly cold face, his expression still extremely solemn. When he had been preparing the various herbs, Hongzhu had been trying hard to recall what the old man in his dream had told him about the medicinal primer, but he had not been able to recall it. Hongzhu could only vaguely remember that the white-bearded old man had said that because the medicine was extremely young and fierce, something had to be used to balance the yin and yang of the medicine. Only then would the severely injured Xiao Chen not die from the impact of the medicinal efficacy. However, the medicinal primer could not be used directly in the decoction of the medicine and could only be used on its own, lest the medicine lose its effectiveness. In this short period of time, Hongzhu had already recalled all the medicinal primers that he had seen and not seen, and even those that he had only read about in ancient texts. Most of them did not seem to be very effective, and there were some herbs that seemed to be effective, but there was no way to obtain them in this place and time. What should I do? What kind of medicinal primer can neutralize the medicinal properties, and it just so happens that I can get my hands on it right now. Hongzhu rubbed his hair in distress. Just as he was feeling depressed, he suddenly heard the sound of something breaking through the air. Hongzhu turned his head towards the source of the sound, and saw that the flying sword had just returned from outside the cave. There was a bulging grey bundle hanging on the sword's body, and it was also carrying a small pot which was used to boil medicine. Inside the pot was a medicine bowl. Seeing this scene, Hongzhu immediately threw all his conflicted feelings to the back of his mind. He quickly ran over and carefully removed the cloth bag, pots and bowls from the ground. When he opened the grey bundle, he found that it was indeed filled with heavenly materials and earthly treasures. There were no signs that it had been tampered with. Hongzhu could not help but cheer. Great! Husband Xiaochen can be saved now. Flying sword, you have done a meritorious deed. And Xiaoma was also a little excited. She controlled the flying sword to swing left and right, circling around the cave several times to express her excitement. Hongzhu carefully examined the bag again and confirmed that there were no problems with the medicinal herbs in the bundle. He then carefully selected the heavenly materials and earthly treasures that he needed and placed them into the pot in order. After that, he picked up the stone bowl and added some water before placing the pot on top of the firewood. Xiaochen, hold on a little longer, the medicine will be ready soon. Hongzhu murmured to himself as he glanced back at Xiaochen. He then took out a flint from his bosom and lit the wood under the pot, beginning to patiently decoct the medicine. After waiting for another half an hour or so, a medicinal aroma finally wafted out from the pot and pervaded the narrow cave. Seeing that the medicinal soup was almost done, Hongzhu did not care about how hot it was. He quickly picked up the pot and slowly poured the finished soup into a bowl. Holding the bowl of medicine, Hongzhu walked to Xiaochen's side and sat down. He stared at the rich medicinal soup in the bowl and began to worry again. But the medicinal catalyst, what is the medicinal catalyst? If Xiaochen didn't have a medicinal primer, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to endure the intense yang energy after drinking the medicine. However, if he didn't drink the medicine, it would only take a few hours for Xiaochen to stop breathing and lose his life forever. Forget it, let's drink the medicine first. What if husband Xiaochen is strong-willed and has a vigorous life force, allowing him to make it through? Hongzhu was afraid that if he thought for too long, the medicinal soup would turn cold and lose its medicinal effect. He simply clenched his teeth and supported Xiaochen with his left hand while holding the bowl with his right. He first pried open Xiaochen's teeth and then fed the medicinal soup to Xiaochen bit by bit. Fortunately, although Xiaochen was unconscious, he had not lost the ability to swallow. In just a short while, he had drunk the entire bowl of medicinal soup. Seeing that the bowl of medicine was almost empty, Hongzhu's heart finally relaxed. He hurriedly put the bowl aside and carefully observed Xiaochen's reaction, hoping that he could successfully make it through this stage without relying on the medicinal catalyst. Chapter 1453. Ugh! Xiaochen finally moved after drinking the medicine. He wrinkled his eyebrows imperceptibly, and a low moan came from his throat. His originally somewhat cold body temperature gradually rose, and his breathing became much more even. His expression also looked much more spirited than before. Husband Xiaochen, how do you feel? Hongzhu called out tentatively, only to find that Xiaochen did not respond at all. However, his body temperature had already exceeded the standard temperature and was still rising. His skin had also begun to turn slightly red, and it felt somewhat hot to the touch. Inadvertently glancing over, Hongzhu saw that a certain part of Xiaochen's body was actually slowly propping up a small tent, and from the looks of it, it was possible that his pants would explode at any moment. Husband Xiaochen, can you hear me? Open your eyes and look at me, okay? Seeing Xiaochen's reaction, Hongzhu's face immediately flushed red. As someone who understood medicine, she knew that this was a natural physiological reaction caused by excessive yang energy. However, she still felt a little embarrassed in her heart, so she could only continue to call out to Xiao Chen in order to divert her attention. But no matter how she called out to him, Xiao Chen still did not move. Besides the reaction of that part of his body, the only other signs of movement were his body temperature, which was growing increasingly hot, and his skin that was so red that it was almost transparent. Seeing this situation, Hongzhu could not help but look anxious. She first touched Xiao Chen's burning hot forehead, and then simply placed both her hands on it, wanting to use her normal body temperature to help him cool down. Phew! As soon as Xiao Chen touched the cool skin on Hongzhu's hands, he seemed to sigh in comfort, and the situation slightly eased. But not long after, Hongzhu's hands also began to heat up, and the heat from Xiao Chen's body had even begun to burn her hands. What should I do? Xiao Chen's husband doesn't seem to be able to hold on for much longer. Hongzhu's eyes darted around anxiously, and suddenly, her gaze landed on the tall, little Xiao Chen, and a bolt of lightning seemed to suddenly flash through her mind. Could it be that she needed to do that thing? Harmony of yin and yang, harmony of yin and yang. Hongzhu repeated these words over and over again, feeling more and more that it might really be as he thought. Men were of the yang attribute, while women were of the yin attribute. Originally, the combination of the two could neutralize the yin and yang, not to mention that she was still a virgin. Wouldn't the medicine that Xiao Chen took be the right medicine? But, when she thought about how she was going to end up like the unconscious Xiao Chen, Hongzhu's beautiful face couldn't help but blush. She tugged at the corner of her clothes with her left hand and bit her lower lip, not knowing what to do. Her mind was a complete mess. Don't be fooled by how Hongzhu often talked about the matters between men and women, as if she was very open, that was all to tease Xiao Chen. She herself was just a little girl without any actual combat experience. If she really had to take the initiative to face it, just imagining the scene would make her feel extremely shy. But apart from this method, there didn't seem to be any other solution. It wasn't that Hongzhu didn't want to join with Xiao Chen, she just felt a little regretful in her heart. After all, this was her first time, while Xiao Chen was still unconscious. Moreover, they were in a simple and crude cave, which didn't seem to be a very good feeling. As her thoughts ran wild, Hongzhu's expression kept changing. One moment she was shy, the next moment she was conflicted, the next moment she was nervous and melancholy. She couldn't even tell what she was really thinking in her heart. Ugh! Just as Hongzhu was feeling extremely distressed, Xiao Chen suddenly moved and let out a low moan that sounded like he was in extreme pain. Hongzhu hurriedly raised her head to look and discovered that Xiao Chen's entire body was very tense. The blood vessels under his skin were clearly visible. Moreover, she could see with her eyes that Xiao Chen's pulse was beating extremely quickly. It was already not the speed that a normal person should have. Seeing this posture, Hongzhu knew that she should no longer hesitate. She let out a long breath and stood up as if she had finally made up her mind. In Hongzhu's opinion, regardless of whether this method would work or not, he had to give it a try first. Xiao Chen had already reached the most critical juncture. If he didn't give it a try, he would die either way. It was better to try it as a last resort. It might even have a miraculous effect. After standing up, Hongzhu did not hesitate at all and immediately began to unbutton her clothes. But she had only unbuttoned a few buttons when she suddenly paused, as if she had thought of something. She suddenly turned her head and shouted to the flying sword that was guarding the side, that, "Flying sword, you go out for a while. Guard the outside and help us keep an eye on it. Don't let anyone, or any creature come close." When Xiaofan, who was hiding in the flying sword, heard Hongzhu's order, he was a little puzzled for a moment. It had been a night and there was no danger, so why did she suddenly say that she wanted to go out and guard the cave? But now that Xiao Chen was unconscious, and Xiaofan did not dare to speak rashly. Helplessly, he circled around the two of them a few times before flying out of the cave resentfully. After confirming that the flying sword had left the cave and could no longer see her in Xiao Chen's situation, Hongzhu began to undress with a peace of mind. In fact, Hongzhu had lied just now. She was not worried that someone or an animal would suddenly come over to cause trouble in broad daylight. She just vaguely felt that this flying sword seemed to be more human-like and had already developed spiritual intelligence. If she and Xiao Chen were to... At that time, this fellow would be watching from the side. Hongzhu felt that something was a little strange, so she deliberately found an excuse to send it away in advance. In just a short while, Xiao Chen's body had become hotter and hotter. His face was red and beginning to turn purple. His forehead was dripping with sweat and his brows were tightly furrowed, looking like he was in great pain. Hongzhu did not dare to delay any longer. She first took off her own clothes, and then took off all the clothes on Xiao Chen's body. Looking at the naked and motionless Xiao Chen in front of him, Hongzhu moved her eyes to a certain place with difficulty. After staring blankly for a while, her mind instantly went blank and she did not know what to do. Ugh! Xiao Chen suddenly trembled slightly and let out a suppressed groan. The veins on his neck popped out, as if he was enduring great pain. Only then did Hongzhu come to his senses. He knew that there wasn't much time left, and he couldn't allow himself to think any further. He could only try his best to recall those Japanese action movies he had secretly watched in the past. Referencing the methods in those movies, he climbed onto Xiao Chen's body and slowly sat down. Ouch, it hurts, damn it, Hongzhu's coquettish voice faintly came from the cave. It sounded like it would cause one's imagination to run wild, but it was impossible to figure out the real situation. Chapter 1454. And Xiaoma was originally wandering around the entrance of the cave in boredom. After hearing the commotion, he thought that something had happened in the cave and was about to rush in to protect him. Before he could move, he heard some strange but ambiguous sounds. Only then did he come to a sudden realization and immediately stopped. And Xiaoma, who was still a little puzzled at first, was now extremely embarrassed. He had to pretend that nothing had happened and swayed left and right twice. Then, he controlled the flying sword to fly further away and really went on patrol. The cave was full of spring scenery. The originally somewhat cold air seemed to have warmed up a lot because of the friction. Although there was only one person moving at this time, it formed an extremely beautiful picture. It was not until half an hour later that the shaking picture finally stopped. Hongzhu was seen lying softly on Xiao Chen's body, panting slightly and sweating all over. There was a tired but satisfied smile on his face. Hongzhu could clearly feel that Xiao Chen's originally soaring body temperature was gradually falling and slowly returning to normal. Most importantly, after the exercise was over, a strong yuan qi suddenly emerged in Xiao Chen's body. Phew! Xiao Chen suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of turbid gas. His whole body seemed to have been struck by lightning. He trembled a few times before his brain recovered. Feeling as if something warm was pressing against his body, Xiao Chen opened his eyes slightly. The first thing he saw was a blurry silhouette leaning against his body. He was immediately startled, but when he took a closer look, he discovered that the person was actually Hongzhu. Husband Xiao Chen. You're finally awake. Seeing that Xiao Chen had opened his eyes, Hongzhu could not help but be overjoyed. She reached out to touch his cheek and raised her 5 fingers in front of his eyes. What's wrong? Where are we? What are you doing? Xiao Chen blinked his eyes in confusion. When he lowered his head to take a look, he realized that the two of them were currently stuck together naked. Furthermore, they were in contact with each other at a negative distance. He was shocked once again and could not even speak fluently. Hongzhu, on the other hand, did not notice that much. Instead, he happily wrapped his arms around Xiao Chen's neck and buried his face in his chest. Unable to contain his joy, he said, "Looks like that old immortal didn't lie after all. I didn't really believe him at first. I didn't expect it to really work. These days, I I was worried about you. It's great that you're fine now. Whoa. Hongzhu, who was originally full of joy, could not help but cry. His heart was filled with all kinds of different emotions such as happiness and bitterness. When he recalled their miserable encounters over the past few days, his extreme worry for Xiao Chen's injuries, as well as his feelings of despair and unwillingness, Hongzhu could not help but have mixed feelings in his heart. It was a very unpleasant feeling. Fortunately, Xiao Chen had finally recovered. Otherwise, he really did not know what to do. Wait, where did this old immortal come from? What are you talking about? Also, how did that? Xiao Chen felt his chest become a little moist. He knew that Hongzhu was really crying, so he did not dare to move. After waiting for a while and seeing that Hongzhu had finally calmed down, he opened his mouth to ask. Blankly rubbing his head, Xiao Chen did his best to recall what had happened. Because he had been seriously injured during the clash with Elder Nangong, he had lost consciousness. Therefore, his memory had remained at that moment and had not changed. Xiao Chen had been unconscious ever since he had been rescued by Hongzhu. He had no idea what had happened during that period of time. All he felt was that he had been dreaming for a very, very long time, but he could not remember the content of the dream. Little idiot, let me tell you the whole story. Hongzhu raised his head and looked at the confused expression on Xiao Chen's face. He could not help but smile through his tears. Using a finger to poke Xiao Chen's head, he said, "It's like this. Previously, you were seriously injured by that old man Nangong. When I called out to you, you did not respond. After that, those disciples under his command wanted to kill all of us. Fortunately, this big sister is exceptionally intelligent and managed to command the flying sword in time to bring us away from the Burning Sky faction. Afterwards, we randomly bumped into this place." Hongzhu did not get up, nor did she put on her clothes. Just like that, she tightly hugged Xiao Chen like a koala, and used a gentle and charming voice to narrate the thrilling events of the past few days in full detail. An old immortal whose entire body is glowing with white light? He can even extend my life? Why does it sound so unreal? I'm getting more and more confused. Xiao Chen rubbed his nose, stunned by the contents of Hongzhu's description. Little scoundrel, why don't you say that it's mainly because I helped you heal? If I hadn't directed my flying sword to steal your natural treasures and patiently decoct medicine for you to take, you wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Hongzhu pouted and grumbled somewhat unhappily and shyly. When the originally battle-hardened Xiao Chen heard these words, his face blushed for some reason. He looked at Hongzhu awkwardly and sincerely said with gratitude, "This time, I really have to thank you. If it wasn't for you, I probably would have already, I even caused you to lose your virginity in this kind of situation. I'm really sorry, I'm really sorry." "You're crazy, what nonsense are you talking about?" Hongzhu rolled his eyes and scratched Xiao Chen's nose. In a bad mood, he lectured, "We've already been husband and wife for a long time, is there a need to thank each other? Besides, Big Sister has always been yours, and our relationship has only taken a step further. Is there still a need to say such distant and polite words?" Yes. Xiao Chen smiled embarrassedly as he thought to himself, "It was clearly you who asked for credit just now, but now you're criticizing me instead. Women are really strange creatures." However, this thought only flashed past Xiao Chen's mind. He was currently filled with gratitude towards Hongzhu, so even if Hongzhu cursed or teased him a few more times, Xiao Chen would not have any complaints. "Boy, don't just thank your little lover. If not for your master kindly reminding her, I'm afraid you would have really died this time." Xiao Chen was pondering how to persuade Hongzhu to come down from his body when a voice suddenly resounded in his spiritual sense. What the hell? Elder Heaven Ancestor, so the old immortal white light that Hongzhu mentioned was you? Hearing Elder Heaven Ancestor's words, Xiao Chen was instantly dumbfounded. He had originally thought that Hongzhu's luck was off the charts, and he had really coincidentally encountered a passing immortal who had lent him a helping hand. He did not expect that it was actually Elder Heaven Ancestor who had manifested himself. Of course it was me. Otherwise, who would be so bored as to run into this deep mountain forest to save an insignificant little fellow? Elder Heaven Ancestor snorted in dissatisfaction. Chapter 1455. I thought there were many great magical powers in the world of cultivators, and Hongzhu just happened to see it. Xiao Chen was a little embarrassed. He quickly changed the topic and asked, "But aren't you just a primordial spirit? How did Hongzhu see you? What's so difficult about that?" Elder Heaven Ancestor explained proudly, "With my strength, I can naturally affect Hongzhu's brain waves and make her hallucinate." "Oh. I see." Xiao Chen answered, not really understanding. He guessed that Elder Heaven Ancestor might have used the method of possessing him to let Hongzhu see an illusion again. However, on second thought, Xiao Chen suddenly remembered something. He asked in a slightly dangerous tone, "By the way, Elder Heaven Ancestor, Hongzhu chose to offer her body to help me heal. Could it be your idea?" "Ahem, I didn't say that. Don't accuse me wrongly." Elder Heaven Ancestor hurriedly denied and said awkwardly, "I only told her that she needed a method of balancing yin and yang to help you resist the drug, but I definitely didn't ask her to make such a big sacrifice." "Are you serious? Did you hint to her?" Xiao Chen obviously didn't believe Elder Heaven Ancestor's words. Alas. To be honest, I also felt a little guilty at that time, because I really didn't think of a suitable method to balance yin and yang. Elder Heaven Ancestor sighed and said sincerely, "But you were in a critical state at that time, and could die at any time. If I didn't come out, we would all be finished. So, although I didn't think of a perfect way to deal with it, I was forced to use this method and told her all the methods I could think of. So, when she saw that I was in so much pain and couldn't do anything, she chose to use her body to save me." Xiao Chen's mood was a little low, and he felt that he had wronged Hongzhu. "The little girl did this because she really liked you." Elder Tian's tone also carried a trace of sorrow as he added, "Previously, when you were about to lose your life, this girl cried so hard that she wanted to die. She even wanted to commit suicide by taking poison. Fortunately, I acted in time and saved her, so that the two of you wouldn't die in this wilderness." In truth, there was one more thing that Elder Tian did not say. If Hongzhu had not taken the poison, causing his consciousness to slacken and his soul to gradually dissipate, he would not have been able to take advantage of the situation and construct such a complete illusion. He would not have been able to successfully inject the information of the prescription and the method to obtain it into Hongzhu's sea of consciousness. After all, when he was fighting with Elder Nangong, Elder Heaven Ancestor had also suffered serious injuries, but because his soul recovered relatively quickly, his strength still hadn't recovered to its peak. Therefore, after Elder Tian helped Hongzhu detoxify his poison, replenished Xiao Chen's qi, and then constructed an illusion to explain the situation to Hongzhu, his primordial spirit also couldn't hold on any longer. He didn't even have the time to think of a suitable method to harmonize yin and yang before he fled in a sorry state. Otherwise, that illusion might really collapse on the spot, and all of his previous efforts would have been in vain. Fortunately, although Elder Heaven Ancestor didn't explain it in detail, Hongzhu was extremely intelligent, and without a teacher, he thought of the most suitable method, and finally saved Xiao Chen. Of course, Elder Heaven Ancestor didn't think it necessary to tell Xiao Chen about this. In any case, now that he had successfully awakened, everything was fine. What? Hongzhu wants to commit suicide for love. Xiao Chen was shocked, staring at Hongzhu, who was lying on top of him with infinite tenderness, and couldn't help but have a good impression of her. When he was unconscious, this little girl must have been in so much pain and sorrow that she would choose such an intense and resolute action. Thinking of his lukewarm attitude towards her in the past, Xiao Chen couldn't help feeling a little guilty, and gently stroked her hair. "Yes, but that's no longer important. I've already erased that painful memory of hers. or rather, I've hidden it, so she will only think that it was a dream, and won't take it seriously. Elder Heaven Ancestor indifferently said, but in the future, don't mention this matter in front of her, or else it'll be very easy to see through it. Alright, I'll remember that. Xiaofan took a deep breath and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. He changed the topic and asked, then are my injuries considered to be completely healed now? Don't tell me I need to rest for a few more days. Look at what you're saying, rest for a few more days, is there a need for that? You don't believe in the medicine that I prescribed for you? Elder Sky lectured him in exasperation. That's not what I meant. Xiaofan wanted to explain a few more words, but was interrupted by Elder Heaven Ancestor. After the yin and yang harmonization just now, coupled with the effect of the medicine, you've now reached the half-step mountain opening stage, which means that you're about to break through to the next stage of profound ascension stage, so hurry back to the Burning Sky sect, and find that Nangong something for revenge. Are you serious? Half-step mountain opening stage. Xiaofan was dumbfounded once again. He subconsciously circulated his mental cultivation method to activate his vital qi. Only then did he realize that the many broken meridians in his body had all been repaired at some point in time. His vital qi had become denser and more solid, and the aura he emitted was also more oppressive than before. Husband Xiaofan, you seem to have become stronger again. Feeling the oppressive aura emitted by Xiaofan, Hongzhu blurted out in surprise, and unconsciously began to circulate his cultivation method. How did I also break through? As he circulated his cultivation method, Hongzhu suddenly discovered that he had also leveled up, and couldn't help but mutter in bewilderment, what's going on? I think I'm about to break through to the nascent soul stage. Just now we are equivalent to a higher level of dual cultivation, so not only have my injuries healed, my strength has also increased, and yours has also soared. Xiaofan smiled slightly, and gave a simple explanation. Wow, so you can actually cultivate while exercising? That's amazing. Hongzhu blinked his eyes, his tone full of surprise and excitement, and his eyeballs rolled around, not knowing what he was thinking. That's right. Xiaofan nodded, lightly pinched the tip of Hongzhu's nose, and asked in a gentle voice, it's already been a few days, right? Why don't we first return to the Burning Sky faction, kill that arrogant elder Nangong, and then I'll slowly help you level up? No way. Contrary to Xiaofan's expectations, Hongzhu actually refused, and instead said coquettishly, there's still a while before the sun rises. Let's hurry up, we can do it again. Big sister wants to break through to the nascent soul stage right now. If you don't agree, I won't leave you. Chapter 1456. I'm going to cling on to you and not leave. After saying this, Hongzhu was afraid that Xiaofan would not agree, so she wrapped her arms around his neck and tightly hugged him without letting go. She pouted and stared at Xiaofan, as if saying, I'm not going, what can you do to me? Seeing Hongzhu like this, Xiaofan felt both amused and helpless. However, he also understood very well in his heart that it was precisely because he had been avoiding Hongzhu all this time that Hongzhu would be so anxious. Even though he had given his body to Xiaofan, he still felt afraid and uncertain. Thinking up to here, Xiaofan's heart was filled with tenderness. He turned over and pressed Hongzhu under his body, lightly kissing her delicate red lips, blocking Hongzhu's cry of surprise. Then, he said with a smile, now that you're my savior, of course I'll do whatever you say. I'll listen to everything you say. Hateful little scoundrel. Hongzhu coquettishly glanced at Xiaofan, reached out to hold his shoulders, and took the initiative to greet him. The cave was once again filled with a strong feeling of spring. The morning sun shone on the plaza of the Burning Sky sect. What should have been a clean and tidy plaza was now a mess of many things. There were bags piled here and there, and many disciples were sweating profusely as they bent over and counted something. Duan Suqing, the sect master of the Burning Sky sect, stood at the side of the plaza with a solemn expression. Gong Xiaoxi, who also had a dark expression, was next to him. The two of them silently looked at the bags of heavenly treasures on the ground as the disciples inspected and recorded them one by one. According to the instructions given by Gong Ruetong, while dealing with the Profound Cloud sect, they had also secretly sent out many disciples to search for the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and Hongzhu. As a result, they had searched all the nearby mountains, but still hadn't found any traces of the two. Because the majority of the disciples had been sent by Duan Suqing to search for Xiao Chen and Hongzhu, their progress had been greatly delayed. The deadline given by Elder Nan Gong was approaching, but there was still a pile of heavenly treasures that hadn't been counted. In desperation, Duan Suqing could only spread the treasures on the square, and then called over all the disciples who were still in the sect, and let them check them one by one. Sect Master Duan, isn't the efficiency of your Burning Heaven sect's disciples a little too low? An impatient voice rang out from afar before the person arrived. Duan Suqing turned his head when he heard the voice, only to see Elder Nangong walking over with his subordinates from a short distance away. With a black face, he berated loudly, "It's just a piece of trash, yet you still haven't finished counting them for 5 whole days. Sect Master Duan, don't tell me you're trying to stall for time and wait for that Xiao Chang to come back and save you?" Due to the assistance of various medicinal pills, Elder Nangong's injuries had already completely healed, so he didn't want to stay in the Burning Heaven sect any longer. It was only because of the reason he had used before, which was to wait for these heavenly treasures to finish counting, that Elder Nangong had patiently waited for so many days. This. Elder Nangong, please don't misunderstand. I'm sure you've also seen that the number of these heavenly treasures is indeed very large. Furthermore, our Burning Heaven sect is already short on manpower, so it's really impossible for us to finish counting them in such a short period of time. Why don't I trouble you to wait for a few more days? Duan Suqing endured his anger and said with a smile. Actually, what Elder Nangong said wasn't wrong. Duan Suqing indeed wanted to stall for time. Perhaps after a few more days, the disciples would be able to find Xiao Chang. Duan Suqing originally didn't have high expectations for Xiao Chang's survival, but Gong Ruetong had always insisted that Upper Immortal Zhao's divine quality was extraordinary, and that he definitely wouldn't die just like that. Furthermore, Gong Xiaoxi also strongly supported his father's viewpoint, which was why Duan Suqing had spent so much effort to find the whereabouts of Xiao Chang and Hongzhu. Humph. Stop talking nonsense. You secretly sent out a large number of disciples just to find Xiao Chang, which is why you wasted so much time. Don't think that this old man really doesn't know. Elder Nangong laughed coldly and mercilessly exposed him. Misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. Duan Suqing's sweat was about to drip down. He wanted to explain a few more words, but was interrupted by Elder Nangong with a wave of his hand. All right, there's no need to count them. Duan Suqing was slightly stunned. He thought that Elder Nangong couldn't wait any longer, so he planned to give up these things and directly leave the Burning Heaven sect. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice in his heart. However, before he could rejoice for long, he heard Elder Nangong continue to say, in any case, most of these heavenly treasures belong to the Profound Cloud sect. Also, hand over all the spirit crystals that you've hidden. This old man doesn't have the time to wait for you to dawdle. Give us all these things, we'll directly bring them back to the Profound Cloud sect and count them ourselves. Gong Xiaoxi had already endured by the side for a long time. When he heard Elder Nangong being so overbearing, he couldn't help but fly into a rage. He couldn't help but point at Elder Nangong's nose and scolded, "You old thing, you're simply going too far. These things were clearly seized from the mountain bandits' lair by our people. Moreover, that place is very far from your Profound Cloud sect. How could the mountain bandits possibly run to your place to snatch it?" Elder Nangong's eyes flashed. He was just worrying about not being able to find a suitable opportunity to establish his might, and now someone had taken the initiative to come knocking on his door. He pretended to inadvertently tilt his head slightly and secretly gave a look to the disciple beside him. Gong Xiaoxi didn't notice and continued to loudly scold, "You're simply taking advantage of the profound cloud sect's power to forcefully embezzle our burning heaven sect's heavenly treasures. Shameless. Smelly shameless. Impudent. Little ant, you actually dare to be disrespectful to Elder Nangong, your F***king looking for death." A profound cloud sect disciple received Elder Nangong's signal and immediately stared at Gong Xiaoxi and scolded. As soon as he finished speaking, the disciple's body shook and revealed the strength of a nascent soul stage cultivator. A faint yuan qi immediately appeared and wrapped around his arm. He jumped straight into the air and then took out a huge sword that was flashing with a green light. Without saying a word, he waved his arms and fiercely chopped down at Gong Xiaoxi. Gong Xiaoxi had never expected that while he was still talking, his opponent would suddenly attack. Moreover, it was a killing move. He had no time to react at all. Moreover, he was not strong enough. Even if he wanted to resist, he would only die in the end. Gong Xiaoxi, who was completely disheartened, clenched his teeth and solemnly closed his eyes, quietly waiting for death to come. Duan Suqing, who had wanted Gong Xiaoxi to shut up, was shocked to see this. Just as he was about to quickly open his mouth to plead for mercy, he suddenly felt a green light flash in front of him and heard a crisp, "Kacha" sound of bones breaking. Chapter 1457. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, and a trail of blood spilled on the ground. Duan Suqing watched helplessly as a round thing fell to the ground, and then rolled to his feet. "Humph, you overestimate yourself. This is the result of going against our profound cloud sect. Sect leader Duan, ask your men to prepare a carriage as soon as possible and pack it with heavenly treasures and spirit crystals. This old man is going to..." Elder Nangong arrogantly clasped his hands behind his back. Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly felt that something was not quite right. Retracting his arrogant chin, Elder Nangong lowered his head to take a closer look. The round object on the ground seemed a little familiar. It seemed to be the head of one of his subordinates. I'm still alive? Gong Xiaoxi closed his eyes and waited for a long time but did not receive the sword qi. He could not help but open his eyes in astonishment. However, what he saw was no longer the scene from before. The ferocious fellow who had swung the huge sword at him had disappeared. In his place was the back of a youth who stood steadily in front of him. The youth's left hand was gripping the blade of the huge green sword while his right hand was hugging an enchanting woman. From the close distance between them, the two of them seemed to be very close. Gong Xiaoxi was stunned for a long time before he carefully walked forward. When he saw the faces of the two of them, he was so shocked that he almost jumped up and shouted, "Immortal Master! Master's wife! Why is it the two of you? Why aren't you dead yet? Bah. That's not right, you're still alive. Xiao Chang. You're actually alright?" When Elder Nangong heard Gong Xiaoxi's voice, he raised his head in astonishment. His expression immediately changed and he could not help but blurt out. The two people standing not far away were Xiao Chang and his cultivation partner. Furthermore, the two of them looked very energetic, especially Xiao Chang. His face was rosy and he did not look like someone who had just been seriously injured. Hongzhu ignored Elder Nangong and snappily glared at Gong Xiaoxi as he lectured, "You're no longer a child, yet you're still speaking so recklessly. Pay attention in the future, don't embarrass your master. Master's wife, you really know how to talk. So I wasn't hallucinating." Gong Xiaoxi's shock turned to ecstasy and he shouted excitedly, "That's great. Master's wife, where have you been hiding these past few days? My father and junior brothers were worried to death. Fortunately, he firmly believed that you would be fine. Now that you've returned safe and sound, he will be happy to death. Exalted immortal Xiao, it's great that you're back." Duan Suqing's blabbermouth gave Gong Xiaoxi a headache. He quickly took 2 steps forward and explained, after the Grand Elder learned that you were injured, he was very worried. That night, he sent most of our disciples out to search for you. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything, so he was so worried that he couldn't eat or drink for several days. If he knew that you two had returned safely, he would be very happy. Originally, when Elder Nangong questioned him, Duan Suqing had wanted to hide it. Now that Xiao Chen had appeared, he decided to spill the beans. This angered Elder Nangong so much that his face darkened. Oh, I went out for a trip and gave this Elder Nan some time to recover before killing him. Otherwise, it would look like I'm bullying him. Xiao Chen nodded and gave Hongzhu a peck on the cheek, causing her to tremble with joy. Everyone present was stunned by her coquettish and bashful look. Although he said so, Xiao Chen thought to himself, if it weren't for Elder Heaven Ancestor and Hongzhu, let alone recovering, I might have died in that wilderness. Ah, congratulations on your return from your trip, immortal Xiao Chang. Duan Suqing complimented him with a smile. Suddenly, he patted his head and said to himself, oh, right. Look at my brain, I have to tell this good news to the Grand Elder as soon as possible. Duan Suqing, who came to his senses, quickly called over a disciple and instructed him to quickly report the situation to Gong Ruidong. Xiao Chen smiled faintly. He turned to look at Elder Nan, whose face was as black as coal, and said coldly, old bastard Nan Gong, it seems you didn't expect that I would come back to beat you, did you? I didn't expect you to have such a tough life. Elder Nan Gong frowned and said in a gloomy tone, last time, you fled in panic because of a woman. This old man was merciful and couldn't kill you with my own hands. Sure enough, I left behind a lot of trouble in the future. Looking up at the flying sword hovering in the air, Elder Nan Gong found that the sword was stained with a lot of blood. It was obvious that his disciple had been beheaded by this thing just now. Xiao Chen curled his lips and thought to himself, old bastard, you really know how to talk big. At that time, you couldn't even protect yourself. If it weren't for that strange magic tool protecting you, who knows who would have fallen to the ground. Now you're really talking big. Glancing at the headless corpse on the ground, Elder Nan Gong's tone became even more unfriendly. Today, I was careless and you took advantage of it. I lost a beloved disciple for no reason. Since you're back, don't even think about escaping this time. Oh, why do I feel that I should be the one saying this? Xiao Chen yawned absent-mindedly, and said very casually, however, this exalted deity's mood right now is still not bad. If you are willing to immediately kneel and beg for mercy, then honestly tell me who ordered you to cause trouble at the Burning Sky sect. This exalted deity might even be merciful and spare your dog life. After he finished speaking, Xiao Chen kicked the corpse of the Xian Yun sect disciple away with the tip of his foot. Then, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and slowly took a few steps forward. A faint light flashed in his deep eyes as he raised his eyebrows at Elder Nan Gong. Seeing Xiao Chen like this, Elder Nan Gong couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He vaguely felt that this kid seemed to have changed into a different person. He had an indescribable aura. Thinking back to the last time he saw him, he didn't seem to have this kind of feeling. However, this thought only flashed in Elder Nan Gong's mind, and he didn't take it to heart. Seeing Xiao Chen's provocative posture, he looked up to the sky and laughed. With a face full of certainty, he asked, Xiao Chang, you must have thought that my injuries haven't healed after the last battle, so you're thinking of taking advantage of my weakness to take my life, right? Xiao Chen blinked his eyes, and before he could answer, he saw Elder Nan Gong's body suddenly tremble. He immediately revealed the cultivation of the peak profound ascension stage and laughed at him proudly. How is it? You didn't expect me to have recovered, right? Are you surprised? Are you afraid? Ha ha ha. Chapter 1458. In fact, Elder Nangong was also a little puzzled. In his opinion, he had borrowed the power of the Xianyun sect. In addition to the protective magic artifacts, he also had many elixirs on him. It was normal for him to recover from his injuries by taking them in time and recuperating. Xiao Chang seemed to have recovered too. What was the excuse of going on a trip? Elder Nangong immediately concluded that this guy was definitely lying. This guy probably had a lot of top-notch elixirs on him and was just pretending. Looking at Elder Nangong as if he was a fool, Xiaochen couldn't be bothered to talk to him. He instructed the two primordial spirits in his sea of consciousness, Little Nethery, and Little Demon, "I'll leave the fools behind to you." After giving the order, Xiaochen immediately used his movement technique and attacked Elder Nangong. He waved his right arm and punched his lower abdomen. Taking advantage of the momentum of Xiaochen's charge, the fire of the underworld also came out of his body. It instantly split into two and attacked the two subordinates behind Elder Nangong from the left and right respectively. And Little Demon controlled the flying sword that was still stained with blood and flew down from the sky with a whoosh. The sword was surrounded by black mist and went straight for another Xianyun sect disciple. "You guys be careful. If you can't beat him, just stall for time. Don't force yourself." Elder Nangong regarded Xiaochen's two magic tools with great importance. His eyes were fixed on Xiaochen, but he gave a few instructions to the disciples behind him. Then, he charged towards Xiaochen. Although Elder Nangong's magic artifact had been shattered by Xiaochen previously, he felt that even if he was unarmed, he would be able to kill Xiaochen who did not have a magic artifact. In the blink of an eye, Elder Nangong's feet stomped on the ground and he pushed his palm out to meet Xiaochen's fist. Boom! When the fist and the palm collided, a loud sound rang out. A powerful shockwave instantly appeared and quickly spread out in all directions. When the two collided, Elder Nangong was slightly puzzled. "It has only been a few days since we last met. Why does this brat's strength seem to have increased by quite a bit?" However, before the Nangong elder could figure it out, he felt a surge of surging essence suddenly follow Xiaochen's fist and ruthlessly charge out, striking his palm. Bang! A muffled thunder-like sound rang out. Elder Nangong's entire body was involuntarily sent flying by the shockwave. He smashed through a few trees at the side of the plaza before he lost his momentum and fell heavily to the ground. Elder Nangong's face was full of disbelief. He raised his head and glared at Xiaochen. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly felt as if his internal organs were in turmoil. He only had time to spit out a few mouthfuls of blood before his vision went black and he fainted. The three disciples of the Xianyun sect did not see the battle between Xiaochen and Elder Nangong because they were focused on avoiding the joint attack of 9 underworld flames and Xiaomao. Because these disciples often practiced joint attacks, they could barely resist for a while against 9 underworld flames and Xiaomao. They followed Elder Nangong's teachings. Since they couldn't hold on, they would try their best to stall for time until someone reached out to help. However, after resisting for a while, the three disciples did not wait for Elder Nangong's help. Seeing that the situation was getting more and more difficult, the three of them took advantage of one of the gaps and looked in the direction of the battle between Elder Nangong and Xiaochen. They were surprised to see Xiaochen looking at them leisurely with his arms crossed in front of his chest and shaking his legs. The three of them were a little flustered. When they turned around, they saw Elder Nangong lying motionless behind a few broken tree trunks. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. There was also a large pool of blood on the ground. They were immediately shocked. There was a flaw in their joint attack. How could 9 underworld flames and Xiaomao let go of such a great opportunity? The two of them immediately took advantage of the situation and hit the three disciples who were at a loss. One of them was directly pierced in the chest by Xiaomao, and the other two were instantly burned to ashes by 9 underworld flames. "Senior brother Wu'er, I heard that master came back safe and sound. Where is he now?" The battle here had just come to an end. Gong Ruidong's urgent call suddenly came from a distance. It turned out that Gong Ruidong had just gotten the news from his disciple. He was so excited that he jumped up and immediately dragged his legs that had just recovered. He couldn't wait to rush to the scene as fast as he could. He looked around the square in a hurry, but he did not see Xiaochen. "Father, junior brother, master is fighting." Gong Xiaoshi pointed to a place not far away and said excitedly in a low voice, "Before you came, Master had already crippled Elder Nangong. Oh, I mean sent him flying. His subordinates have also been eliminated by him. He is now preparing to interrogate them. You'd better not disturb him now. Let's talk about it later." Gong Ruidong quickly turned his head and saw Xiaochen walking towards Elder Nangong with a smile. He was still holding a water ball in his hand. Okay, I will wait here. I am willing to wait as long as it takes." Gong Ruidong's face was full of joy. He nodded and promised. Xiaochen didn't notice what Gong Xiaoshi was doing. Instead, he walked straight to Elder Nangong and waved his hand slightly. The water ball spell that was originally floating in the air poured onto Elder Nangong's head with a splash. Puff. Cough, cough, cough. Elder Nangong was still in a coma. He was directly awakened by the water. He lay on the ground and coughed out a few mouthfuls of blood. Xiaochen was too lazy to care about Elder Nangong's pretense. He kicked him hard and said with a sullen face, "I just abolished your cultivation. Don't pretend to be dead in front of me. If you don't want to feel that feeling again, tell me quickly. Who sent you here?" The skin on Elder Nangong's face became a little loose and old. He stared at Xiaochen in a daze, his eyes filled with disbelief. He trembled as he asked, You're already an opening mountain expert?" Xiaochen smiled coldly and answered with a tacit agreement. Although his cultivation was only half a step away from the opening mountain stage, since this old thing was willing to believe so, there was no need for him to rush to deny it. He would let him be surprised for a while. How is this possible? Elder Nangong was so shocked that he could not close his mouth. He said with a face full of disbelief, "Previously, you were seriously injured by me and basically lost your vitality. In just a few days, not only did you successfully recover, but you also successfully broke through?" Chapter 1459. Alright, don't talk about those useless things. Xiaochen waved his hand and continued to ask, "Isn't your Yunxian sect quite powerful? Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself by finding such a poor excuse to stand up for those mountain bandits? I'm in a good mood today. I'll give you two choices. Either tell me the person who instructed you, or..." Xiaochen didn't finish his words, but made a, expression, then he snapped his fingers. The underworld fire and Xiaoma, who were originally wandering around those disciples, heard the signal and immediately approached. The former emitted a strange blue-purple flame, swaying in front of Elder Nangong, ready to burn him to ashes at any time. The latter didn't say a word and directly put the flying sword on Elder Nangong's neck. When the flying sword was put on the neck, Xiaoma, who was hidden in the flying sword, deliberately shook slightly, making a clear cut on Elder Nangong's throat, making him groan in pain. Elder Nangong struggled in his heart for a while. When he sensed Xiaochen's rising killing intent, he knew that there was no way he could resolve this matter peacefully. All he could do was hang his head and explain in a low voice, "This old man, actually, I have never seen that person's true appearance. This is because we normally communicate through voice transmission talismans. I only know that his subordinates address him as the young master of a large faction. Your Yunxian sect, which is ranked second in the immortal cultivation world, is actually a dog for other forces." Xiaochen sneered and said sarcastically, "I really didn't expect you to have such a hobby. No, this matter has nothing to do with Yunxian sect. I brought my own disciple to help him." Elder Nangong quickly denied it this time, and then explained, "Because the young master's father saved me back then, so I want to return the favor this time." "So, young master's father? Then he is the old master of that force? What is his name? What does that force do?" Xiaochen frowned. He was not used to Elder Nangong's tongue-twisting words. Elder Nangong's eyes flickered slightly. He muttered to himself for a moment before changing into a helpless expression. He smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, I only met the old head once. After he saved me, we exchanged contact details. However, we never met again, so we don't have a particularly deep friendship. Is that so? So you came to provoke him this time because you knew in your dream that his son was in trouble, so you took the initiative to help, right? Xiao Chen's expression did not change, and he casually found a reason for Elder Nangong. No, we usually keep in contact through the sound transmission talisman. Hearing Xiao Chen's merciless mockery, Elder Nangong's sweat dripped down, and he added while trembling with fear, even when I was ordered to stand up for that young master, I only went to his residence once, and simply chatted with his subordinates for a bit. After understanding the situation, I immediately brought people to Burning Heaven's sect. Oh, if that's the case, then take us to his residence tomorrow. Xiao Chen brushed his sleeves, and said indifferently, I want to see what this strange young master really is. Elder Nangong's strange expression just now had already fallen into Xiao Chen's eyes. He knew that this guy was definitely not telling the truth, but he did not plan to pursue it too much. Right now, he only had this one clue, so he could not force him too much. Before finding out the young master's true colors, Xiao Chen decided to temporarily let Elder Nangong live. Anyway, this guy was now a cripple, and could not cause any big waves. Guards! Detain this good-for-nothing. Seeing that Xiao Chen had already finished interrogating him, Gong Ruidong and the others, who were standing not far away, immediately courteously welcomed him, and conveniently ordered the other disciples to take Elder Nangong away and imprison him. Arriving in front of Xiao Chen, Gong Ruidong first respectfully bowed, then revealed a happy smile, and said, Greetings, Lord Master. You don't know this, but ever since you disappeared, I, your disciple, have been unable to eat or sleep in peace for several days. Today, seeing that you and Master's wife are both fine, my heart can finally be at ease. Although Gong Ruidong had always firmly believed that Xiao Chen and the others were not dead, and had asked Duan Suqing to send people to the nearby mountains to search for traces of them, he still felt uneasy after not finding the whereabouts of Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu for a day. Now that he saw the two of them alive and well, and that Xiao Chen's strength seemed to be even stronger than before, Gong Ruidong's heart finally fell to the ground. Father, senior brother, I already told you, didn't I? Our senior immortal master looks like he will live for 100 years, how could he be so easily killed by bad guys? You are making a fuss about nothing. Gong Xiaoxi casually patted Gong Ruidong's shoulder and said. Gong Xiaoxi's proud look seemed to have completely forgotten that when he was panicking before, it was Gong Ruidong who stabilized the morale of the troops and pointed out the right path for him to calm down and arrange the follow-up work. Yes, son, you are right. It is all my fault for being too nervous. Gong Ruidong was in a good mood, and did not intend to refute anything. Instead, he happily nodded his head and echoed. I say, the two of you are really. Xiao Chen frowned as he looked at the two of them, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he still shook his head and said, Forget it, this weird relationship always gives me a headache. Let's not talk about such nonsense and quickly prepare some hot food. I am about to die from hunger. Xiao Chen subconsciously rubbed his stomach. He had been unconscious during this period of time, and besides drinking a bowl of medicinal soup, he had not eaten a single grain of rice. When he had just woken up, he had been forced by Hong Zhu to hand in his homework several times. Even though he had broken through to the half-step mountain opening realm, he had still almost collapsed from exhaustion. That's right, this master's wife is also so hungry that her chest is sticking to my back. Let's quickly go eat. Hong Zhu also walked over at this moment, stretching her body as she said this charmingly. Originally, Hong Zhu was a young girl who was both charming and pure, and now that she had tasted the forbidden fruit for the first time, her entire body exuded a kind of fatal attraction. Every movement of hers had a charm that made one unable to move their eyes away. Gong Xiaoxi was subconsciously attracted by Hong Zhu and stared at her in a daze for a long time. Only when Gong Ruidong gave him a heavy kick did he return to his senses. It was not that Gong Xiaoxi had any improper thoughts towards his master's wife, but because of the mental cultivation method that Hongzhu cultivated, he could not help but be attracted to her. Gong Xiaoxi swallowed hard, then bowed with a smile and said, "Great immortal master, master's wife, sect master Duan has already thought of this, so he has already ordered the disciples to start preparing. I believe that it should be about time now. Please come with me, I guarantee that you will all have your fill." Chapter 1460. After the matter was settled, the few of them swept away the haze in their hearts for the past few days. They chatted and laughed as they walked towards the kitchen, leaving a string of cheerful laughter in the Burning Sky faction. That night, Xiaochen still stayed in the Burning Sky faction, patiently consolidating his cultivation that had just reached the half-step mountain opening stage. He originally wanted to continue working hard and break through to the first level of the mountain opening stage, but after repeated attempts, he still couldn't find the way, and could only helplessly choose to give up. In fact, the most important thing was not that Xiaochen didn't know how to cultivate, but that Hongzhu was constantly harassing him, teasing him from time to time. Now that the two of them had broken through that layer of window paper, and their relationship had also taken a step further, Hongzhu also became even more unscrupulous. His words and actions made Xiaochen's mind swayed, and his heart rippled incessantly. Since he couldn't make a breakthrough in a short time, Xiaochen simply stopped cultivating. He hugged Hongzhu and rolled on the bed a few times, before the two of them hugged each other and fell asleep. Early the next morning, Xiaochen and Hongzhu packed their luggage, and after a simple farewell to the group of people in the Burning Sky faction, they stepped onto their flying swords outside the sect. Under the gazes of Gong Xiaoxi, Duan Suqing, and the others, they carried Elder Nangong and left on their flying swords, flying towards the location of the mysterious young master. The few of them flew according to the direction pointed by Elder Nangong for about an hour, traversing over towering mountains and lofty ridges along the way, passing through large stretches of primordial forests, and occasionally hearing Elder Nangong's fearful cries along the way. Finally, before the sun rose, they arrived at the outskirts of a prosperous town. "Hey! Old man, don't make a ruckus. Don't you realize that your legs can already step on the ground?" Hongzhu angrily kicked Elder Nangong, gritted his teeth and said hatefully, "I couldn't tell that a dignified sect elder like you, who was once an expert at the peak of the profound ascension stage, would actually be afraid of taking a plane. You're too useless." Along the way, Hongzhu's ears were almost deafened. Good heavens, an unprepossessing old man could continuously howl for an entire hour, and his voice wasn't hoarse at all. Could it be that he had practiced before? A bel canto singer? Miss Hongzhu, please don't joke with this old man." Elder Nangong's face was deathly pale, and his legs were trembling like a sieve. After persevering for a while, he finally couldn't stand it any longer. His legs went soft, and he fell to the ground on his butt. Thinking back to the experience in the sky, he still felt a lingering fear. "When was I joking with you?" Hongzhu angrily glared at him and said with a huff, "What elder of the second largest sect? I think he's just an old man who's afraid of heights and gets airsick." How annoying. Elder Nangong's face was bitter. He trembled and said with a sobbing tone, Although I used to be in the mysterious ascension stage, I'm just an ordinary person now. If Immortal Xiao accidentally let me fall from the sky, wouldn't I be smashed into pieces? That would be an ugly death. Why are you talking so much?" Xiaochen impatiently grabbed Elder Nangong's collar and pointed to a nearby town. "Where is that young master hiding? And what is this place? You better tell me the truth right now. Otherwise, this immortal doesn't mind letting you fly again. But this time, I can't guarantee that I won't be in the mood to catch you." Don't. I'll tell you right now." Elder Nangong's face changed. He hurriedly pointed to the town and said, "Young master lives in one of the houses in Yaoxian County. This old man will bring you there right now. It was precisely because of these few confrontations that Elder Nangong was very clear that Xiao Chang was definitely a person who would do what he said. Therefore, he didn't dare to delay or be negligent. He hurriedly forced himself to stand up straight and limped towards the town. Actually, after being detained in the prison yesterday, Elder Nangong originally wanted to use a sound-transmitting talisman to inform the young master in advance. However, he didn't expect that the Burning Sky sect disciple who detained him would actually search his body and confiscate all his valuables, including the entire bag of sound-transmitting talismans. Feeling helpless, Elder Nangong could only give up on this plan. Right now, he could only take one step at a time and hope that the young master could come up with a suitable and foolproof plan. Xiao Chen and Hong Zhu looked at each other before holding hands and carefully following behind Elder Nangong. They maintained a distance that wasn't too far away from him. This way, they wouldn't appear to be deliberate and would ensure that they would be able to capture this fellow in an instant. In order to prevent this old thing from playing any more tricks, Xiao Chen's mind was tense and he was ready to act at any time. Even if he discovered that something was wrong, he was confident that he would be able to escape with Hong Zhu. However, what surprised Xiao Chen was that Elder Nangong's mood was extremely calm on the way into the city. He didn't make any strange movements and only walked in front of them obediently, as if he had truly accepted his fate. However, the calmer and quieter this fellow was, the stronger the strange feeling in Xiao Chen's heart became. After entering Yaoxian province, Xiao Chen pondered for a moment before quietly assigning Hong Zhu a task. He told her to find an inn to stay in and that he would pick her up after he finished his business on his side. Although Hong Zhu was somewhat unwilling, she also knew that her strength wasn't enough to help Xiao Chen and would instead be a burden to him. Thus, she didn't say anything and quickly found an inn that looked more proper to stay in. She then watched as Xiao Chen followed Elder Nangong further and further away, gradually disappearing without a trace. The moment Xiao Chen's group stepped through the gates of Yaoxian province, the young master was resting in his own courtyard. The young master crossed his legs and frowned slightly. His expression was somewhat solemn. Ever since he had contacted Elder Nangong, he had been trying to find other information about Xiao Chen. However, regardless of whether it was the information from Elder Shen or the information he found through other channels, there was nothing about Xiao Chen at all. The young master could not help but feel defeated by this situation. More importantly, he suddenly realized that Elder Nangong hadn't contacted him for several days. This was something that had never happened before. Deeply worried, the young master directly tried to contact Elder Nangong through a voice transmission glyph. However, there was no reply either. This time, the young master's mood sank even further. According to his judgment of Xiao Chen and Elder Nangong, it was very likely that the unkillable Xiao Chang had returned to cause trouble for Elder Nangong and had successfully counterattacked. Chapter 1461. With that thought, the young master suddenly stood up and paced back and forth in the study room. With Xiao Chen's vengeful personality, could it be that Elder Nangong had already been killed? Just as the young master's thoughts were running wild, someone suddenly knocked on the door and walked in without permission. The young master turned around and saw that it was Elder Shen who was in a hurry. He did not wait for the young master to speak and immediately cupped his hands. With an uneasy expression, he reported, "Young master, according to our spies in the prefecture, Elder Nangong is on his way here. There is also a young man following him not too far away. According to our informant, the relationship between these two people is not ordinary." He really came? The young master stopped and muttered hatefully, "This old fart is really unreliable. He just has to emphasize how powerful he is. I knew that Xiao Chen would not be so easy to deal with." "Young master, then what should we do now?" Seeing the young master's expression change continuously, Elder Shen could not hold it in and asked. After a moment of silence, the young master raised his head and ordered, "Immediately inform everyone in our residence to destroy all relevant evidence. Do not leave any traces, then retreat from the secret passage." "Understood, I will do it now." Although Elder Shen did not know the young master's reason for doing this, he still nodded decisively and accepted the order. Just as he took a few steps towards the door, Elder Shen suddenly thought of something and turned around to ask, "Young master, that little girl with the surname Cheng is currently in the prison cell in the garden of the residence. How do you think we should deal with her? Should I just kill her or bring her here?" His fingers rhythmically tapped on the table a few times. As if he had made a decision, the young master solemnly ordered, "You don't have to worry about that little girl. I will personally arrange her whereabouts. Now, you should go and deal with other matters first. Once everyone in the residence has safely evacuated, find me at the entrance of the secret passage. Then, we will make the next plan." Although he did not know what the young master wanted to do with that little girl, Elder Shen did not dare to ask too much. He immediately responded and left to start arranging the evacuation of everyone in the residence. The house that was originally peaceful suddenly began to boil. Everyone began to move. Some were busy destroying things, some were hurriedly packing up, and some were running around like headless flies. For a moment, the whole yard was in chaos, and people were in a complete mess. Meanwhile, the young master stood at the door of the study and calmly glanced at it. Then, he silently left the study and walked towards a secluded path. In the gloomy cell, Cheng Menjing lowered her head and sat there gloomily. Her body was tightly bound by a rope that was filled with strange symbols and looked like a dumpling. When Cheng Menjing had just been tied up by Elder Shen, she had tried to break free, but every time she tried to use her essence energy to break the ropes, the symbols on the ropes would emit a faint golden light, directly dispersing the essence energy that she had gathered in her body, and then it would return to silence. After trying a few times, Cheng Menjing finally understood that the rope that was tied up on her body was not ordinary. It could use the strange symbols on it to suppress the essence energy of the person being tied up. Furthermore, with her fiery eyes, she had never failed before. Needless to say, Cheng Menjing could guess that this was definitely the young master's bad idea. However, there was nothing she could do about this rope. She could only helplessly give up on the idea of escaping. Fortunately, other than being tied up and unable to move, there was a specialized servant girl to take care of everything else, so there was no inconvenience. Creak. The sound of rusty metal scraping against each other could be heard. The metal door of the cell was opened by someone. Cheng Menjing, who was in a daze, looked up when she heard the sound. When she realized that the person who came was the young master, she couldn't help but glare at him hatefully. Then, she angrily turned her head away and put on an indifferent expression. "Miss Cheng, you're living comfortably here. Every day, there are servants to serve you. Your days must be pretty good, right?" The young master stood in front of Cheng Menjing and smiled sinisterly. "Whether it's comfortable or not, won't you know after a few days? Why are you asking me?" Cheng Menjing snorted coldly and retorted mercilessly. The young master's expression turned ugly after being rebutted by Cheng Menjing. He simply bent over and picked up the rope that was tied around Cheng Menjing's body. He pulled her up and was about to drag her out of the door. He didn't forget to say viciously, "I thought that you were probably tired of this place, so I specially found a new place for you out of goodwill. Come with me." "I don't want to." "You? Where are you taking me?" Cheng Menjing was shocked. She couldn't help but be dragged out by the young master. She stumbled a few steps before she remembered to struggle with all her might. "Let's go to a place first. I'll let you see some good things. Then, I'll bring you to a new cell to settle you down. Don't worry, the new place won't be worse than this fake mountain." The young master turned around and bared his teeth at Cheng Menjing. He looked extremely terrifying. "I'm not going. You. Let go of me." Cheng Menjing struggled with all her might, but it was to no avail. She was still dragged out step by the young master. Cheng Menjing was anxious and angry. She originally thought that when she was imprisoned, Xiaofan would coincidentally find this place and rescue her. She didn't expect that after waiting for a few days, there would still be no trace of him. She couldn't help but curse the young master in her heart. "All right, this matter isn't up to you. You'd better follow me obediently." The young master increased his strength and dragged Cheng Menjing out of the cell without any explanation. They passed through the corridor and out of the fake mountain. Cheng Menjing originally thought that the young master would take her outside the house. She didn't expect that they would just circle around the fake mountain and arrive at the side of another secret door. The young master looked around vigilantly. After confirming that there was no one around, he pushed open the secret door and entered the dimly lit secret passage. Then, he closed the secret door casually. From the outside, not a single trace could be seen. The two of them walked deeper into the secret passage. Cheng Menjing looked left and right at the secret passage. She realized that the surroundings were rather rough, but there were many signs of use. Moreover, the entire secret passage was very deep. Even after walking for a long time, they still couldn't reach the end. The young master silently led Cheng Menjing forward until she felt that they had long left the house. When she didn't know where she was, the young master stopped at a fork in the road. Chapter 1462. Cheng Menjing looked around and found that this fork was connected to several doors in different directions. Some of them seemed to be secret rooms, while others seemed to be exits or entrances. From time to time, someone would come in from one of the openings, holding bits and pieces of things in their hands. Then, they would hurriedly head in another direction and disappear at the end of the secret passage in the blink of an eye. There seemed to be several magic arrays set up in the entire secret passage. For example, as long as someone entered or left the door would light up with a silver-white light. It looked like a small magic array, but it was unknown what it was used for. When the people dressed in servants' clothes passed by the young master and Cheng Menjing, they seemed to completely ignore the young mistress who was tied up. Instead, they bowed respectfully to the young master, then turned around and left in a hurry. The young master stood at the fork for a while, seemingly observing the situation of the people coming and going. Then, he walked towards a door and pushed it open with Cheng Menjing. They walked into a secret room. After Cheng Menjing walked into the secret room, she still looked back at the slowly closing door. She mainly stared at the light on the door, wanting to see what the magic array looked like. However, because the light was too bright, she couldn't see it clearly. "It seems that you are quite interested in this magic array?" The young master noticed Cheng Menjing's abnormality, but he didn't stop her. Instead, he said with a proud look, "Humph, what's there to be interested in?" Cheng Menjing was caught red-handed. She snorted uncomfortably and said, "Isn't it just a magic array for illumination? It's flashy but useless." "That's where you're wrong." The young master raised his eyebrows and pointed at the magic array on the secret door. "This magic array isn't used for illumination. It's used to detect the situation and prevent enemies from invading." Cheng Menjing looked at the faintly glowing magic array in astonishment. She couldn't figure out how such a small magic array could prevent enemies from invading. "Since you are also a high-level immortal cultivator, you must have released your divine senses to investigate the surroundings, right?" The young master seemed to have become addicted to being an explanation. He explained in a clear and logical manner, once a cultivator's divine sense comes into contact with this kind of formation, it will automatically activate and set up all kinds of targeted illusions to deceive the opponent, making them see the wrong illusion. Even if your servant, Xiaofan, came here, he would still be trapped by this formation. "You make it sound like it's real." Cheng Menjing pursed her lips. She didn't really believe the young master's introduction. Xiaofan won't be deceived by such a low-level smokescreen. "You're just wasting your time." Although she said that, Cheng Menjing didn't have much confidence in her heart. Firstly, she didn't know if Xiaofan would be able to rush over to save her. Secondly, after this period of immersion in the immortal cultivation world, she also knew that there were many strange things in the immortal cultivation world. She didn't know if Xiao Chun could easily see through this kind of magic array. Ha ha ha, Miss Cheng, you're too naive, aren't you? The young master looked up to the sky and laughed a few times. He walked to a corner of the room that had a magic array drawn on it. He stretched out his hand and pulled on the rope, dragging Cheng Menjing in. He said with a proud expression, "Let the truth tell you the truth." After saying that, the young master started to circulate his mental cultivation and revealed his golden core stage level 5 cultivation. Then, he started to silently chant a strange incantation. When Cheng Menjing felt the young master's strength, she was a little annoyed. If she wasn't tied up by this strange rope, dealing with this guy would be a piece of cake. The young master didn't know what Cheng Menjing was thinking. He continued to chant the incantation step by step. The magic array on the ground immediately emitted a soft white light. The white light was projected onto the wall in front of the two of them, reflecting the image of the front door of a house. Cheng Menjing focused her eyes and realized that the house was no different from the house that she had been caught in. However, there was a huge sign hanging on the door. Moreover, there was no content on the sign. It was blank and looked very strange. Why does it look like a surveillance camera? Cheng Menjing muttered silently. Although she was usually careless and didn't understand the abilities of cultivators very well, she still remembered that Xiao Chun had mentioned that some magic arrays seemed to have the effect of surveillance. That's right. This is a surveillance array. Just watch patiently. There will be a good show to watch later. The young master nodded his head proudly and directly admitted it. Cheng Menjing was a little puzzled. Looking at the young master's confident look, could it be that Xiao Chun had really come? Sure enough, not long after, the image on the wall reflected the figures of Xiao Chun and Elder Nangong. When Cheng Menjing saw the familiar figure that she hadn't seen for a long time, her eyes instantly turned red. There was an indescribable emotion in her heart. In the past, the two of them often spent time together, so Cheng Menjing didn't feel anything. After a period of separation, she realized that she actually had a strong dependence on Xiao Chun. Especially after entering the world of cultivation, so many people were missing. Even if she wanted to find them, she couldn't. She often woke up in fear at night, worried that something bad had happened to the others. At this moment, seeing that Xiao Chun appeared safe and sound, Cheng Menjing couldn't be more happy. Did he know that she was locked up here by the bad guys, so he specially came to save her? The surveillance image on the wall was still playing. She saw Xiao Chun and Elder Nangong enter the house one after another. Elder Nangong seemed to be familiar with the layout of the house. He turned around and said something to Xiao Chun, then led the way to the room where the young master was. From the image, Xiao Chun seemed to be more cautious. He followed behind Elder Nangong carefully and looked around from time to time, as if he was looking for something. Although his steps were very slow, he gradually left the range of the surveillance image. Did you see that? My servant has come to save me. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and let me go. Cheng Menjing took a deep breath to calm her emotions, then shouted at the young master. The young master acted as if he didn't hear Cheng Menjing's words. He directly walked to another array and chanted an incantation. Then, another image appeared on the wall. It seemed to be the path to the main room of the house. Xiao Chun and Elder Nangong were walking in step by step. Apart from them, there was no one else on the image. The whole house looked very cold and deserted. Did you hear what I said? Cheng Menjing put on a fierce look and threatened the young master. If you serve me well, I might consider pleading on your behalf. Otherwise, I'll let my servant, Xiao Chun, send you flying. He's not like me, he has such a good temper. Chapter 1463. Oh, I'm so scared. The young master stared at the image without turning his head. He did not forget to mock, wait until your Xiao Chun can find our secret passage first. Even if he can enter the secret passage, those illusion arrays are enough to make him lose his mind. In the image, Elder Nangong and Xiaochen had already walked to the outside of a large room. Elder Nangong went up and knocked on the door respectfully. Xiaochen directly struck out with his palm and smashed the door to pieces. Then, he rushed in. Seeing Xiaochen recklessly destroying his own courtyard, the young master's face was a little ugly. He quickly walked to another array and projected the scene inside the room onto the wall. He saw Xiaochen walking back and forth, carefully inspecting the empty room. Elder Nangong stood at the side with a pale face. He also looked around in confusion, as if wondering why this place had suddenly become empty. Xiaochen. I'm in the secret passage, behind the fake mountain in the back garden. Hurry up and save me. Cheng Menjing took advantage of the young master's inattention to take a deep breath and shouted at the wall with her loudest voice. The entire secret room was shaken by Cheng Menjing's voice. The echo lingered in the air for a long time. "Oh, damn, I didn't know you were so young, but you have such a loud voice." The young master rubbed his ears and rolled his eyes at Cheng Menjing. He said casually, "But this trick is useless. Don't waste your energy. The entire secret passage has a layer that isolates divine sense and sound. Even if you shout yourself hoarse, he won't be able to hear you." Just as the young master said, although Cheng Menjing's voice was loud, Xiaochen on the screen did not notice it at all. He continued to search the room. "Xiaochen. Xiaochen. I'm here. I'm in the back garden. Hurry up and come over." Cheng Menjing was a little unwilling to give up. She wanted to try a few more times, so she shouted at the wall. "Alright, stop shouting. I don't mind telling you that the secret room we are in is no longer behind the fake mountain in the garden. Also, the courtyard that Xiaochen went to is not the same courtyard that you were locked in. So it's useless for you to shout. Give up." The young master waved his hand impatiently. When Cheng Menjing heard what the young master said, she immediately felt a little discouraged. She glared at Xiaochen, who was still looking left and right in the room, and muttered, "Stupid Xiaochen, you're so stupid. You can't even find me like this. You might as well just blow up the entire floor. Maybe it'll have some effect." It was unknown if Cheng Menjing's words were effective or if Xiaochen suddenly found some clues, but he suddenly turned around and quickly walked out of the room. Soon, he disappeared from the surveillance screen. Creak! The moment Xiaochen's figure disappeared, the secret door of the young master's secret room suddenly opened. The sound of the iron door turning could be heard. The young master, who had his back to the iron door, jumped in fright. He thought that Xiaochen had really been called over by Cheng Menjing. He couldn't help but shiver. He suddenly turned around and put on a defensive posture. Cheng Menjing also thought that Xiaochen had come. She turned around happily, but she saw Elder Shen walking in with some documents. The excited expression on her face immediately collapsed. Young master, everyone has been evacuated. All the useless documents have been destroyed. There are no clues left. What should we do next?" Elder Shen looked at the two people with different expressions. He didn't understand what was going on, but he didn't dare to ask in detail. Instead, he reported in a serious manner. Cough cough. When the young master saw that the person who came was Elder Shen, he withdrew his defensive posture awkwardly. He cleared his throat and pretended to be nonchalant as he instructed, "Oh, what did you say just now? Everyone has been evacuated, right? Then let's go. Since Xiaochen likes this place so much, let him slowly play by himself." After saying that, the young master pulled the rope in his hand and dragged Cheng Menjing out of the door. The immortal binding rope in his hand was a magic tool that could suppress a cultivator's essence qi. Although it couldn't hurt people directly, it could disperse all the essence qi that the person who was tied up had mobilized. Therefore, even though Cheng Menjing had the cultivation of the original soul stage, she was no different from an ordinary person after being tied up. The young master didn't have to worry about her suddenly launching a sneak attack or escaping. Cheng Menjing was dragged out by the young master and couldn't help but walk out. She tried her best to turn around and looked at the images on the wall in despair. She realized that Xiao Chen had already returned to the front yard and was inspecting everywhere. She couldn't help but shout with all her might, "Xiao Chen! Xiao Chen! I'm here! Can you hear me? Come and save me!" Unfortunately, Xiao Chen was still completely unaware. He frowned and looked around the yard. Meanwhile, Cheng Menjing had already been brought out of the secret room by the young master. Her shouts also became softer and softer until they gradually disappeared into the distance. "This place, why is it so strange?" Xiao Chen stood in the middle of the house and muttered to himself. He didn't know why he felt an indescribable sense of irritation in his heart. Just now, he had already used his divine sense to search all the rooms in the house. He had also personally checked all the suspicious places, but he didn't find any clues. Apart from being a little puzzled, Xiao Chen also felt an indescribable sense of anxiety. It was as if a small claw was constantly scratching his heart, but he didn't know where this feeling came from. Xiao Chen could sense that there should have been a stranger's aura in this house a few minutes ago. But why was there no one after he entered? Suddenly, they all disappeared. Could it be that someone had informed him in advance? But ever since he entered the city, he had been staring closely at Elder Nangong. He didn't see him make any movements to send out any messages. Isn't this too strange? Could it be that the other party's spies have already spread all over the town? Elder Nangong stood behind Xiao Chen in confusion. He originally thought that when he brought Xiao Chen to visit suddenly, the young master would definitely be caught red-handed in the room. He didn't expect to find nothing. So now, Elder Nangong felt a little guilty. He silently stood on the spot and didn't dare to make a sound. He was afraid that if Xiao Chen couldn't find him, he would take revenge on him. Now that he was powerless, he didn't even have a chance to resist. "Why have you been standing here like a fool?" Sure enough, as Elder Nangong expected, after looking around, Xiao Chen couldn't help but sink his face. He stretched out his leg and kicked Elder Nangong's leg. He said angrily, "Is there any secret passage here? Or does that guy have other hiding places? Hurry up and bring me there, don't waste time here."